Say what? Perfect. Hey, it helps to have a little social lubricant, I guess. I think, I have recorded it. Got it. Okay, cool. All right. Yep. All right, as promised, here is Banjo Thursdays. This is a piece of my own composition, which is as yet untitled, from the film How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change, which you can watch right now for free on joshfoxfilm.com. Here we go.
Mainstream media hates us.
You are confusing democratic socialism with socialism.
They can't stand progressives.
2020, will you cover progressive candidates that run uncorrupted?
Well, I got news for them. We're going to attack back.
Was the blood of my classmates and my teachers worth your blood money?
Stephon Clark was shot and killed in his own backyard. Israeli soldiers used live ammunition and tear gas.
The bombing campaign has begun in Syria.
She burns facts, and then she uses that ash to create a perfect smoky eye.
This is a brilliant video and an excellent social commentary.
The United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Two totally self-obsessed megalomaniacs.
We had a good chemistry.
They go, but I need a boogeyman. Immigrants! Immigrants are the problem.
This notion that they have welfare checks waiting for them at the border is also preposterous.
I mean, come on, that's where Border Patrol draws the line, calling them cages. So what will you do?
You know what death epidemic is happening in our country? Gun violence.
Another young African-American male who was unarmed, shot, and killed. I have no idea if we'll ever receive justice. Now there's 5 people laying down on the ground. People keep dying every day. When are we going to do something about it? Sacha Baron Cohen, at times, just flat out genius.
There was no collusion. I didn't know the president.
Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
I live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk.
There's infinite amounts of universe, and there's alternate universe.
The Saudi crown prince ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
I don't make deals with Saudi Arabia. I don't have money from Saudi Arabia.
This is a circus.
Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from yelling. I believed he was going to rape me.
The country is dealing with yet another massacre, this time in Thousand Oaks, California.
Shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. 11 people were killed there.
The Chicago shooting at Mercy Hospital.
Multiple fires in the state of California have claimed the lives of dozens of people.
Black people existing is not suspicious.
It's so tone deaf to tell people of color that very few people are racist when we gotta watch our sons die on the streets every week.
It is important to note that these minors are very well taken care of.
A 7-year-old migrant died on American soil.
Don't believe the press.
They let that 7-year-old girl die. Your heart goes out to them? What heart?
We do need a people-led revolution. Revolution meaning getting involved, getting engaged.
2018 was the question mark we thought it was going to be. 2019 is the year of the fight.
College-bound high schoolers, purpose-driven, and they haven't stopped.
We will vote to arm our teachers with funds, not guns.
Amazon has just announced their employees will now be making $15 an hour.
Senator Warren, great to have you here on a day that you introduced the Anti-Corruption and Public Integrity Act.
Someone said TYT or CNN? TYT.
Big changes in terms of diversity in Congress that looks more like America, finally. Rashida Tlaib is going to be sworn in on Thomas Jefferson's Quran, which is both amazing historically and also will cause many right-wing heads to simply explode.
You gotta believe. And especially in an era like this, the more we come together, the better we're all going to be and the stronger we're all going to be.
What's awesome about this march is it's hopeful.
If there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written yet, you must be the one to write it.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. That's what this country is supposed to stand for.
This is Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal and why we're not going back. Thank you so much for tuning in at TYT or the Gasland page or the Josh Fox page or the Climate Revolution page or WBAI or listening to us on our podcasts. So today, my guest is Jan Rich Frell, who is pretty much a genius when it comes to media, and we're going to be talking about media. Also, we have Chloe from Rising Appalachia, the wonderful folk music duo usually, or group, but we just have Chloe tonight, but she's really amazing on her own. We're broadcasting and taping today here once again from New York City, the Wow House in Brooklyn. And we're doing such because I could not stay home when I saw what was going on in the streets of my fair city, in my home, New York City. I had to get out and be a part of these protests for Black Lives Matter, for George Floyd, for justice against police brutality, to defund the police, and that are addressing so many of the intersectional ills that we're seeing right now. And I got to say, it is a really insane and intense atmosphere. As a lifelong protester, I've never, ever been in a situation where simply arriving at the protest was risking your life. Well, that's not really true. I think you're always risking your life to a degree if you're in a protest where there are police, where there are riot gear police, where there are police with rubber bullets, and there are police who are willing to shoot at you, which happens quite often during protests. But this is a situation that's entirely different. The kind of being hyper aware and the kind of alertness that happens when you both have to, we're wearing a gas mask or some kind of face mask, and you're hyper vigilant about the coronavirus all around you, at the same time as you have to worry about the fact that there are literally thousands of police everywhere and that we've been witness to incidents of police brutality all across the nation. So being at these protests is something extraordinary because every single person there is risking their life in multiple ways. You're risking getting coronavirus, and you're risking confrontations with the police. And yesterday, and the last couple of days that I've been out, I've been witness to these confrontations that it's very, very tense. There are moments when it certainly seems like it could go either way, where protesters are peacefully demonstrating, and they are very upset about the rules that have been set up in front of us, which is to say 8 o'clock curfew in New York. Are you crazy? Curfews all across the nation. What is this? This is a police state, the military state. This is unacceptable. Curfews have no place in our society. And this type of militarization of the police has no place. There's no way to resolve a conflict like this with more of the same type of thing that we're protesting in the first place. The mayor has to come out and come to Barclays Center, and city council has to come out and start to talk about political solutions. This is a political problem. This political problem cannot be solved by putting people in more harm's way. I mean, so being out there in these situations where people are obviously out past curfew, trying to defy curfew, and then during the protest where many people were trying to walk across the Manhattan Bridge and the Brooklyn Bridge, and they were not allowed to. And knowing full well the history of this, as I believe happened during Occupy, when the police said, oh yeah, fine, walk across the bridge. And then they sealed off both sides of the bridge and arrested everybody. I think it was something like 1,000 arrests at that time. This was years ago. So I was filming a confrontation between protesters that were trying to get on the Brooklyn Bridge. And then they went around to this other on-ramp on the Brooklyn Bridge and met by a huge phalanx of police officers. And people were chanting, quit your job, take a knee, quit your job, march with us, walk with us. Trying to welcome the police to our side, and then the police eventually letting these people onto the bridge. Then I did not get on the bridge because I know the history of how this happens, and people were trapped on the bridge for over an hour in New York City in a situation of a pandemic, which is incredibly difficult to maintain social distancing when you're trapped on either side of a bridge, right? So you're subjecting these protesters, who I'm assuming Mayor de Blasio has sympathy for, because he's a Democrat. He says he's a progressive. And now you're subjecting all those people to potential infection from the pandemic. Unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. And where is the media? And what is the media showing us? And that is the subject of today's program, is talking about the media, because Jan Rich Frell was the publisher of Alternate for many years, and also now the publisher of the Independent Media Institute. And we have to talk about this because we don't see climate coverage in the media. We don't see coverage of the types of things that I'm describing in the media. We're thankful so much to TYT and to all the other sources for putting this program on and talking about these issues. Because as we know right now, the media is not just something that we see on a TV box, but the media comes to you through so many different forms. We're going to discuss those issues tonight and how difficult that is in terms of trying to discern and maintain not only the truth, but also an appeal towards justice, which I think is at the center of all journalism. So stay with us. Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal, coming to you once again from New York City because of necessity. Coming up, Jan Rischfeld. Oh, I think he's here. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about the media as and all of our conversations that we've had over the years have been scintillating when it comes to talking about the media and dissecting what's going on in the media. Because as you know, I'm completely obsessed with truth. And my book, The Truth Has Changed, and my film, which is coming out this summer, which I'm working on feverishly right now to get ready, is all about how the internet, it's almost impossible to get a sense of objective truth in any sense, because people just don't know what they're seeing, when they're seeing, and how it's being targeted to them. And this is a subject that I know that you talk a lot about yourself and have had a lot of trouble with.
I was just going to say the climate change problem is a terrible problem, and the media issue of it is large enough that it can be studied on its own, and it is studied. And some of the things that you learn when you unpack it bring you face to face with something as maddening as climate change, which is the media problem associated with it. And if you wanted to kick off with a number, I think one that just is astounding is the largest TV networks in America combined in 2018. In 2018, spent 142 minutes talking about climate change.
A whopping 142 minutes. 142 minutes is almost exactly the length of my film on climate change.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's a little bit shorter than that. But that's basically 2 hours of climate change in how many hours of programming? Thousands of hours.
Yeah, 24 times 365. Yeah. Okay, so it's you can with numbers like that, you can safely predict public attitudes, right? Because we recognize that television is still the driver and main principal educator in this society, right? Not all societies are like that, but this one is. So you could safely predict that the latest Gallup has a poll, and of the many polls it does, it has a poll called America's Most Important Problem. It's a tracking poll that it follows every month. And so the numbers for May, 1% of Americans think that climate change is America's most pressing problem. It's not even close to the issue of prayer in schools and decline in faith, which is 4%. So you get a sense of that, and then you could even zoom in and you could say, well, let's go to what you'd hope from a leading purveyor of truth and information, the New York Times. Well, actually, it has backslid considerably since the 80s. Scientists and the people who study public attitudes on climate change, they determined that there's basically 5 key facts that are sort of gateways to belief or understanding in climate change. They identified them. And I can go through them, but the one that has backslid the most in terms of coverage is the mechanism. So in the 1980s, they used to say much more often, in 1% of their articles on climate change, they used to say that it was caused by fossil fuels. Now it's 0.2%. So it was terrible in the 80s. But with 30 years to get woke, they backslid by a factor of 5.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And even more fascinating is how the news, because that's not true for me, right? When I go online, all of my feed is climate change. You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, and you're listening to it. It's called Your Revolutionary Guide to the Green New Deal. So we're talking about the Green New Deal in the media. So I'm saying, like, I look on my feed, and it's like all climate change all day long. It's like CNN for climate change on my feed. But you're saying that that's not the case for anyone else, right? That's just me because that's what I like, and they know that I like it. And it's so upsetting to me because I want to make a movie, or I want to make another movie, or I want to make 6 more movies. And every time I make a movie, only people like me will get to see that movie because that's who's it's going to be promoted to. That's what's making me mad.
Or that's what you, Josh, are able to achieve as an independent media maker, unless you find ways to unlimited federal subsidies and access to finance markets and whatever to become a media conglomerate. You can achieve educating a pittance of the public, and not only that, right? Any kind of serious issue that needs resolution requires steady coverage,
right,
across a range of platforms. So.
Right. Well, that's why I feel like I've been lucky to have HBO and Netflix on my side and putting those films out.
Right.
HBO more than Netflix, because HBO is still a channel, right? It's still, the show is on at this time, so it presumably is getting to a wide range of people. But increasingly, that is going to change to become this very same model of psychographics and targeting and search engine optimization and addressable ad technology. So let's unpack some of the way, for people who don't know this, let's unpack some of this, because one of the most important things that you've said to me back in the day was, you said, well, the news media targets what you like now, but in the future, AI is going to be writing the news articles. And they're going to say things like, well, you remember when it was cloudy on the day of your high school graduation? Well, the Trump administration is facing similar storms this week. The kind of tailoring of every single factoid to your particular profile. Talk to us about this.
I think as a media experience, you can really understand the profitability of that, but B, also just the addictive nature of that. Let's be humble as people. If you start getting used to writing that's written for you, like your best friend wrote you an email about the result of a sports game, and they knew what you cared about first, like who hit the homers, and who got the most strikeouts as opposed to the attendance or whatever, you're going to get hooked on that. You're going to see the old way of making information, which, say, for example, you or I might try to produce. They're going to say, well, that's not really written for me like this other stuff. So that's the first thing, is the understanding that this stuff will have a strong appeal, and that once it's out the door, it's, for the consumer who isn't necessarily politicized, it's a superior product. And also for the ocean of advertisers who are tracking you as you journey through life and are, right now oftentimes they end up selling you what you already bought, or what you jokingly looked at, but sometimes they're selling you what you think you might buy. The acceleration of data and predictions and will produce outcomes where you're going to get a personalized email. Let's say you're a not very well educated voter, you're a Trump voter, say. All those things that offend your sensibilities, well, they just won't be in the article, or they won't be in the video.
They'll just edit them out.
Well, yeah, it's going to be far less profitable
to offend you, right? Because then you'll go to a different site, right? You'll be like, I don't want to get my news from this place anymore. It's just bad news.
Yeah, and then you'll get used to it. And
so it's really hard for us as media makers to challenge opinions in this particular moment, right? Because that's what I do. That's what my journalism does. It's like, okay, well, nobody knows about this thing called fracking, so I'm going to make a film about it that is trying to appeal to the widest range of possible viewers so that they can become educated. And it did work with that first film, Gasland. It worked because we were able to get penetration into places that normally
you got penetration. Right. This is what I was going to say earlier, is you got penetration. But then what did you prompt? You prompted an awareness that there was something that needed new techniques to resolve its impact. So what you had was I don't remember the numbers precisely, but I think there was over $100 million spent to attack your documentary.
Something like $50 million spent.
50, sorry, I don't want to exaggerate. Yeah,
well, that's an
million.
estimate. I mean, it could have been, it's probably more. That was the estimate in 2013.
There we go.
So
okay,
at that time, it was 50 million. That's a conservative estimate.
So let's just say you were to able, as you did, stick your nose through there, get through. Well, there's always a consequence to a success like that, and $50 million showed up. But going into the new media platforms where, I don't want to present something, oh, it's doomed or whatever. I mean, I think some of these media studies I've been looking at over the years about coverage for different stuff and where media is going. I think there's a little bit still of the old school thing where they're sort of like New York Times, ABC, NBC, CBS, what did they say? And I think you really have to factor in, and maybe it's worth doing this for this environment topic, Josh, with you in some way, is let's go into Netflix and Amazon Prime's library of documentaries. Obviously they'll never give us honest numbers about who watched what, but we can at least see what's prioritized and what's in the pool and, do a numeral thing. I mean, certainly one bonus of this time we're in is that people get very good educations on issues and have access to documentaries like the one you made and thousands of others, right? Through these purveyors, and the purveyors are quite happy to offer. I'm sure if
I think that there's definitely an opening for other types of content. But let's just talk about the more insidious ways that this is intersectional. Because when we're talking about me and climate change, okay, well, that's fine. It's like I am encouraged to continue to do this work because I'm getting articles from Michael Mann and Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and other people in my feed that's about climate change, right?
Yeah.
But let's say you're racist, or let's say you're just maybe indifferent to racism, and so therefore you don't care about it. Or let's say you're sort of racist and you don't even know it. You're unconsciously racist, which, by the way, the computer knows, but you don't know, right? Because when you mentioned the ocean of advertisers, ocean is actually the anagram, right, for these psychographic traits. O for openness, C for conscientiousness, E for extroversion, A for agreeableness, and N for neuroticism. Ocean. These are psychological traits that make up every human brain. And we are charted and mapped along that psychographic curve. And the openness, if you score low in openness, that is a great indicator for prejudice. If you are not an open person, you probably are a racist, you probably are a sexist, and you might not even know that you are. But the advertisers know, and that means they can feed you content that can make you more racist, or keep you at the same level of racist, or make sure that you don't get affected by the protests that are happening now, right? So these are the kinds of things that we're dealing with as it's like literally an infiltration into your psyche by the internet, by the machine.
Right. The ocean, just to go with your example, the ocean, if you're not open-minded, it may show you ads for guns, right? In a time of a pandemic, in a time of a mass protest concerning, brutal police murder. Right. They might say, gosh, gun sales are up. Let's sell this closed-minded person a gun. Whereas
and Donald Trump.
Right. And then the dial you turn the dial and actually this person's conscientious, let's see if he's interested in buying, masks in bulk that he could distribute in Brooklyn or New York for all the pandemic processes. But the components of the AI automation are interesting. Some of it is because of labor, getting rid of the cost of labor. So it's just automated content. It's the bulk data owners who possess whatever ocean data on you, your buying history, all that stuff, who will start telling you that story. So really, it's an interesting kind of combination of Silicon Valley capitalism serving its advertisers and its own second to whatever informational value you wanted to get out of this information. But it's certain to be addictive.
You're watching and listening to Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Jan Rich Frell. We're talking about the media. If you're just tuning into all of this, it's that the internet is constantly compiling data on you, right? When you watch this program, that's data. When you go to the store, it's data. When you buy something, it's data. When you go to the hospital, it's data. It's all data. And the Trump campaign in 2016 amassed 5,000 individual data points on every voter in the United States, every adult in the United States, 5,000 data points. So that data was given to them or was stolen or was sold. Nobody really knows. We do know that Mark Zuckerberg has had several private dinners with Donald Trump and Peter Thiel, the board member of Facebook and also the Trump supporter. And so they got your number. They got your digits. They got you internally. They got you externally. So it's at this point that you're no longer watching the media as much as the media is watching you. How do we deal with this problem in 2020 in this election, Jan?
Oh man, I mean, I think you have to be humble before the problem. We're standing in front of, a macro problem. I would say also that we have limited attention spans and limited resources. But I would say if you wanted to go deeper and closer, tie into your question about truth and all that it's weird for us in the US, but in other countries, political news and political information is not valid unless it's known to be sort of associated or come from a political party. And in America, it's like, it was such a shock that Fox, we're still waiting for Fox News to admit that it's the Republican Party, whereas, like CBS pretends or whatever, right? Well, you can look at an example of a healthy version of information actually being validated by something political in what you saw with the Sanders campaign, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I feel, and I don't think it needs to be equal. I don't think the resistant force needs to be equal to the other one. Because the Sanders thing was the only Democratic thing. It's associated with people who actually can go out and get out the vote, etc. But not only that, there's some connection of information, politics, action. It's all synthesized.
See, this is brilliant because this is one of the reasons why I really didn't want Bernie to end the campaign. Not just because it was a presidential campaign that I didn't want to end, but because it was the media.
Yes, no, precisely. In other countries,
created media stories, and it distributed them.
Yeah, in other countries, this is not an insight, but to be humble as a lefty, I think it is something of an insight. Is that and not only that, the campaign is the presidential campaign is one of the few vehicles you have for kind of being in the news every day and getting out a message. So, there aren't these other things that other countries have or that progressive or left movements have. So why would you end the campaign? In my view, in my humble view, I feel that a fusion of what the Bernie campaign did in terms of media with some sort of televised format like the Oprah Winfrey Show, seriously, could be an ongoing show with a range of progressive politicians.
Right.
And then people come on as guests to talk about it, like everyday people or experts on public issues to talk about it. And then you have an audience talking about it. Some replication of that in television could be a truth vehicle.
That's in a way what I'm trying to do with this show, right? Having in-depth conversations with a person like yourself, right? I don't really know if I should cast myself as the Oprah, but what I would say is this, that Bernie campaign, I spoke about this with Brianna Gray on her podcast, which was from the Bernie campaign. And I went on and we were talking about climate change, but we were also talking about this. We were talking about how, the campaigns themselves were able to educate people, not because they had to educate people to actually talk about the issues. right? You had to explain climate change to talk about action on climate change. You had to explain the Green New Deal to talk about action on the Green New Deal. You had to explain Medicare for all and all the problems with the healthcare system to talk about the issue and actually get campaign people. So they became these ways that people got educated. What does that do to journalism, though? What does that do to this idea of the objective standards of verification and fact checking?
I mean, you know, I would say just go to a country like India, which has a prime minister who's under threat, or who's basically a fascist. Even in a country like India, the existing left parties have a number of education and media organizations that are affiliated, related, or subordinate to them. And they actually serve as ongoing education vehicles that kind of track with the political events of our time, but also provide kind of a shared sensibility of what's what. Right. And in this country, I think it's so weird and so ethereal that even sort of figuring out how you decide whether or not something is true actually needs to be part of the education, right?
Well, yes, of course, because right now it is not that we're competing with opinions, right? We're competing with the basic idea of truth, right? Like the coronavirus will magically disappear, says the president, or all sorts of things that are blatant, like climate change doesn't exist. I mean, these are the two things I find that misinformation is most deadly and most worrisome, because it's literally fatal on a timeline that isn't infinity. It's a timeline of like right this moment, right? And you can feel how people who didn't believe, who didn't accept, I should say, the science on climate change were the same people who didn't accept the science on coronavirus, right? And it all goes to the ends of the big business machine, because we know that it was disproportionately poor and Black people who were dying of coronavirus. So it was part of that whole seamless white supremacist package. Here you go. You don't have to believe in climate change. You don't have to believe in coronavirus. We'll let you protest in the state capitol with AR-15s. Meanwhile, if you bring, a Three Musketeers bar to protest in New York, you might get maced and shot with rubber bullets and words.
And sign up for updates from American Greatness, and you're set. You're good to go.
So how do we combat? We have only a few minutes left. About 3 minutes left. So how is the Independent Media Institute positioning itself to try to change this? And what are the stories that you guys are highlighting right now?
Okay. On that front, one of the models that we've realized and adopted is that a lot of the problems that we have here in the U.S. are of a global nature. And I think climate change and the COVID and global public health illustrate that nicely. And that if you're here in the U.S. and you're trying to deal with any of these issues, you find that things are actually kind of hollow, or you find them to be sort of relatively hollow once you get a taste for looking at these things from a kind of a more international perspective. So one thing I've been doing with the folks we work with is trying to get the stories that we produce, find out in a sort of Venn diagram, what are the ones that are actually of interest internationally. And what does it take to build a network of relationships with publishers all over the world? So we've been syndicating to, 50, 60, 70 different countries while still working with independent progressive publications, media outlets here in the US. That's one. On this front, I have to say a little bit guilty here. We shifted a lot of our initial environmental coverage to what the news demanded, the COVID pandemic. And sure, a lot of good things came out of it. And we, how are we materially successful for climate? Well, laterally, right? Just like a lot of stuff, laterally, because you can have a conversation about the regulation of corporate agriculture, the destruction of the environment, that, we can't go into these caves. We can't just go into every single habitat and pull stuff from it and think it's not going to do something to us. And there are knock-on effects there. Obviously agriculture and habitat loss are going to be your two big drivers, aside from just how much fuel you put up, exhausts you put up in the air. So in that sense, it's doable. But I feel like just yet another limitation about media and being an independent media producer is you really have to pick your spots, and you fall victim, like a tsunami. In terms of a long-term solution, I feel that the individuals who participated in the kind of platform, forum, and media conversation for the Bernie Sanders thing are keepers of a flame who sort of need to find the folks who produce Ellen's show or Oprah's show and realize the power of daily television and use it through the only thing that you kind of access you can have to politics, right, is this endless presidential campaign. And find a way to turn your TV show plus your events plus your digital thing into an education platform that's, I think, a little more patient. If you're like, all right, these endless campaigns, they take 4 years. So, not every statement needs to be an immediate thing that you need to vote for so-and-so, but that actually you're a part of something and we're all going to get educated.
I would like to host somewhat of that conversation. I mean, there are a lot. I am connected to a lot of the folks who were running the Bernie campaign. I think Bernie is trying to do that right now. I think Bernie is actually, doing these talks, right?
Yeah.
I was
the talks. Yeah. I'm following.
But I don't.
Yeah.
But I think since he's not a candidate anymore, the number of people watching those talks are going down and down and down. So also, we got that nut to crack.
But not only that, they don't have a kind of a political talk is a good thing, but it has to be hitched in some way to the future. So there has to be the notion of something that's ongoing, like a multi-year thing that is associated with electoral politics. And what it could be is a legitimate version of Howard Dean's, we're gonna recruit candidates and they're all going to get elected so that there's some
like our revolution or DSA or DFA.
Yeah. In other words, to make it relevant, some people who are going to get elected in the future are participating with that. So that has to be woven in.
Amazing conversation as always. Thank you so much, Jan, for being on with us today. I always appreciate talking to you. Come back again soon and we'll continue to hash it out. And let's you and I talk about how to make this happen, since now we have maybe a little bit of a toehold. So thank you so much for being on.
Okay, cheerio.
You're tuned in to Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal and why we're not going back. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. So please make sure you subscribe and share and do all the things that you do to promote this show. Next up, we have Chloe from Rising Appalachia.
Howdy. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Nice to see you. I'm doing good. How are you? Where are you?
I'm at home in Appalachia, North Carolina. I live on a farm, on a hemp farm, which is rad.
Right. And you are one of those folks who is always touring. Nonstop touring. We had Nako on the other night, who's always touring. I'm always touring. Part of this idea of staying home was because we can't tour. So how is it to have an extended break? This must be one of the longest touring breaks that you've had in a long, long time. What is it like for you as a musician, as an artist?
Yeah, great question. I'm here on behalf of Rising Appalachia, which is a big band. There's 6 of us, but it's run by my sister, Leah, and I. And, there's a lot of things that have come up, I'm sure, for all of us. Part of it is the joy of being home and the routine and the ritual that we're not awarded as touring musicians. I'm growing food and I'm like visiting with my neighbors, and I had a very in and out life. So I'm very thankful to be home and to be just living on this little piece of land and learning about it daily and watching things change and watching the leaves come in. I mean, all of that has been a blessing. As you know, the whole music industry is shut down more or less because it just completely revolves around putting artists on the road full time, playing upwards of 200 shows a year. So that's weird. I mean, it's just strange, part of it is an opportunity for us to rethink how we do this. And part of it is sad because we're not able to do our work in gathering with humans and just being in a room together, sharing energy. And that's mostly what we do. Although now we're leaning into other things. So it's a little bit.
I'll never take a live audience for granted again.
Yeah.
1 or 2 or 10 or 20 or whatever,
Exactly.
So what are you going to play for us today?
Well, it's always hard to pick a song.
It is.
But due to the climate of our country and just all the things that are so heavy on all of our hearts, I wrote this song called Speak Out a handful of years ago when the Charlottesville riots and protests happened. And I'm from Atlanta, which is a little bit of a different South than like the rural South. But as a Southerner, I just felt like it was my duty and my honor to kind of speak about what I want to see this country represent and this region represent. And so this song has come back pretty full power in the past couple weeks since, all the violence has gone down and the police brutality. And it feels relevant, as a lot of pieces of art do. You write them at one time and then a couple years later, you're like, wow, I kind of also wrote this for this time. So I'd love to play this for y'all. Hope you can hear it okay. It's called Speak Out. And there is a full band version of it featuring Ani DeFranco, who's a huge hero of ours. Here we go. Who are you? What have you become? What have you done to this beautiful kingdom? I don't want your guns. I don't want your poisons. I don't want your weapons and tools of mass distraction. I don't want your red flags. Don't want your baggage. I don't want your hate speech, your supremacy. Where are your wilds? Where is your roughness? Don't tell me you've traded it for comfort and privilege. I don't want your fast foods. I don't need to buy it. I don't want your miles and miles of advertisements. I don't want no. So step up, speak out, show up, be loud. 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 Be loud. Peace of mind or a piece of the pie. 9 to 5, living in a plastic empire. Where is the house for the wounded and homeless? Can't sleep on the streets, can't afford to own this. Everything is I, me, my. Busy working for the dollar while the will runs dry. Minimum wages, maximum security. Simple pleasure traded for business and authority. Whoa. So step up, speak out, show up, be loud. 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 Step up, show up, be loud. Show up, step up, speak out, be loud. Show up, step up, speak out, be loud. Show up, show up, show up, show up.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah, I feel like that song is about, calling and speaking what you want to see not happen, if that makes sense. So, there's the power of manifestation, and then there's the power of speaking what we don't want to see. And I think there's a real importance and magic in both, and knowing kind of when to do both.
Yeah. As a last thought, do you have a message for your fans? Because I think of your fans as so connected. When I go to see a show of yours, it is like visiting another subculture. You know what I mean? There's like a whole dedicated following that's there everywhere you go. Do you worry about the fans maybe in like a last minute? And do you have something to tell them in your absence? Because you are so present there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think now is a great time and a great reminder to check in with our elders who have perhaps been here before, been at the center of extreme change and animosity, and kind of ask some questions that that you might have access to from your elders. So that's giving us a lot of hope and a lot of information right now. And also, step into the struggle and step out. It's always a constant battle of how much we can be and then taking care. So find that for yourself and listen to music and do what you need to do to kind of center yourself, because the world is crazy, eh? And it's also really beautiful. So here we are.
Chloe, thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to see you, and I hope to see you somewhere along that long, dusty trail.
Yeah, keep up the good work. Peace.
Thanks. Peace. All right. That's our show for today. Until next time, don't stay home. Get out on the streets. Protest for justice. Show up against police brutality. Show up for Black Lives Matter. Show up. Thanks. We'll see you tomorrow. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching today's show. If you like the program, which it sounds like you do, I'm sure you're also going to like this book. It's my first book. It's called The Truth Has Changed. It's got a foreword by Bill McKibben. It's out from 7 Stories Press. This book is a first-hand account of the massive smear and misinformation campaign that the oil and gas industry ran against yours truly. It was orchestrated by, among other people, Steve Bannon and Breitbart.com. So you get a sense of the kinds of techniques that they were using. But this was all happening back in 2010, 2011, 2012. And what I went through personally is very similar to what the Trump campaign and the Trump administration put the electorate through in 2016. They learned my psychology, my personal details, and they used that to attack me. That's the way the Trump campaign uses information that they get about you, your data, your psychographics. They tailored 5 million individual specified ads towards voters in swing states, and it's all right here in The Truth Has Changed. It starts off as a first-hand account of my frontline reporting from 9/11 through the BP oil spill, through the fracking wars, all the way to Standing Rock. But really what it does is it zeroes in on how the internet targets you specifically and voters specifically, and gets at what we care about the most to twist that inside out and get them to vote the way they want you to vote. So check it out. The Truth Has Changed. It's a beautiful edition. It's got some pictures. And I'm sure you'll love it. So you can get it from 7 Stories Press or at www.thetruthhaschangedtour.com. Thanks.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding. Because this is C-SPAN, and anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a. Call us now at Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but But then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. Aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, we were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
Guys, as we're all home, we're using the internet way more. You need your internet protected. You don't want prying eyes in there. No hackers. Dun, 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 dun. They're there. Actually, they're now more active than ever. So make sure you got a VPN. NordVPN has been with the Young Turks for a long time. They're one of the best services available. So NordVPN.com/TYT, and you get a free month extra. Plus, you get 70% off of a 3-year plan. NordVPN.com/TYT.
Welcome into the conversation on TYT. I am Adrienne Lawrence, and I'm guest hosting today. And I'm also bringing you two very impactful voices. And the first up is Darrell Bradford, the Executive Vice President of 50 CAN. That's a nationally supported education advocacy org. And the man has some 14 years working experience in education reform, policy, and advocacy. So Darrell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and there's so much going on, and that has been going on all year long in terms of COVID-19, and then now we have these nationwide protests. But kind of just stepping back to the time when we had essentially a pandemic that was the most pressing thing before us, there was nationwide closures of nearly 125,000 schools impacting some 55 million students. That's instructional time, college readiness. But as I understand it, Black students suffer the most. Can you expound upon that?
Yeah, so one of the things I like to tell people, or sort of start when I get in these conversations about distance learning and what happened when the districts and schools of all types, public, private, charter, all shut down as a result of the crisis, is that COVID shines a spotlight on every inequity in our society. And so if it's the fact that, Black folks, low-income folks, or people of color work disproportionately in the service industry, or might live in multi-generational households with old people, young people all coming in and in a high contact way, and that was part of the reason why those communities were hardest hit by the virus. You just got to add all that up and consider it as well. But when the districts closed down, very few of them actually had real plans to teach online. And there are lots of reasons for that. One of them was that lots of districts hadn't invested a ton in technology. Some did, some didn't. And that broke down along economic lines. Like rich districts had it and lots of poor districts did not. Lots of like New York City really did a very slapdash job of trying to train its teachers even to teach folks online, right? And then there's the whole challenge of internet connectivity and devices. Like, yeah, everybody may have a cell phone, but not everybody has stable Wi-Fi at home. Even if you have Wi-Fi, it's nicer to have a computer than just a handheld. Sometimes if there are a lot of kids in the house, there's only one computer. Everybody can't be on it at the same time. And so when you add all that up, you sort of have a perfect storm that winds up hitting low-income kids hardest, and that's what's happened. The one thing I do want to say, some of the data that's come out about this that's really important is that low-income families spend just as much time trying to get their kids educated online as rich families do. And so despite the disparities in some of the results we've seen, and we can talk about it some more, I find it heartening that in the middle of the crisis, the idea that Black families don't care about their kids is being dispelled by Black families. And I think that's a very important takeaway.
Yes, Darrell, I'm really glad you raised that point, because there is a lot of ignorance out there in thinking that Black people are not as invested in their children's education. And we know that not to be true. And recently you wrote an article for the 74. It was titled Black Lives Matter and Black Education Matters Because Freedom Matters. And in that article, you said, we can't have an all education matters approach to the challenges of Black education. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so it took me a long time to get over the target of being able to describe that way. So, I say this in the article too. I've been Black my whole life. I got a Black life. It's real important to me, right? That is a lot to me. Black, like if 10 people are standing on a street corner and one person gets hurt, that's the person you give the Band-Aid to, right? It's not an insult to not give a Band-Aid to 9 people who aren't hurt, right? And Black Lives Matter activists, I think, have really cut to the core of the fact that if the least of among you, right, if the most put upon among you are not safe, then no one is safe.
Exactly.
Right. And so our American public education system is designed for everybody. And it has historically been designed for an everybody that's not African Americans. We're the only people in the history of this nation who have been denied freedom and education through public policy. Like not because not through scarcity, because it was a matter of law that could not happen. And if you take that history and you add it up, how can you take the solutions of a leafy, Iowa suburb and drop them down in Bed-Stuy. You just can't do it, and it has occurred to me, it occurs to me and a lot of people that Black folks, we need our own thing. We need something different that is just about us. We need a Black Education Matters solution that respects our history and our fears and our hopes and our dreams in a way that the current system just doesn't do.
Absolutely. And the fact that, we're kind of in a situation where we spend a fair amount of our time in public spaces in fear because of the Amy Coopers of the world, the white woman in Central Park who called the police on the Black man, or because of the police. So the thought that we could sit in educational institutions and learn the same is not necessarily the case. And I also wanted to hit on another similar point. We have Education Week saying that American public schools are going to need $70 billion for the next 3 years in terms of federal stimulus. And then at the same time, we have this movement pushing to defund the police, as in, don't give the police so much of your budget. So what kind of parallels do you really see between the education and the criminal justice system?
Oh, what a good question. You look like you do this for a living. So the police, right, as a workforce, they mirror teachers as a workforce. And I want to be careful about this because in both places, right, there are people who want the best for everyone. And in both places, there's like a small percentage of people who should be doing something else, right? And in the police force, the person who should be doing something else, if they are empowered and protected, they can end your life. And in schools, the person who's in charge of teaching you, if they aren't particularly good at it and are empowered and protected, they can make sure you never become the person you're meant to be. And so that's not an attack on either institution. It's just a sort of a realization of the thing. But I have found it interesting that people are saying for the police, government can't do this. Turn it all over to civil society. And it's like, well, I might be in the middle of that, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that we could turn over to civil society, but the police protect our freedoms. Like, how do we do that better? And then on the other side, for education, people are like, the government is the only entity that can do this. And I'm like, I don't know how that works. Like, if over here the church and the local grandma and the Kiwanis Club or whatever, right, have a role to play. Over here, those institutions probably have a role to play too, and it's local and it's contextual. So it's been interesting to see the same arguments emerge in reverse depending on what the issue is. I guess I would just say that, like, given where Black Lives Matter is in particular, this, like, I'm happy to see the discussion is at that place where somebody wants to do something. Like the president, for all his flaws, like, he signed an executive order today. Like 4 years ago, we would have been like, what? Like, is that ever going to happen? So there has been progress. I'm heartened by that against this dangerous backdrop we live in.
Oh, absolutely. And also just the fact of the administration in which we live and kind of the pressures that are put on the educational system to continue to function without the needs that it essentially needs.
Well, can I say one thing? Yeah. So the number you cited, 75 billion was the ask for what's called CARES. So, like, I know your listeners are astute. So the last stimulus package. Folks are talking 250 now, 250 billion. Like, on the one hand, I always sort of joke about this because the letter that the big city school superintendent signed about this was basically like, we know it's a lot of money, so we'll take it in installments, But on the other side of it, this is the only time that the federal government has ever shut down both the economy and schools of all types. And so they are implicated in some of these revenue shortfalls. And even I've argued that, like, look, more money for all schools. Like, you can't expect people to deal with all the problems of reintegrating kids back in school, maybe having to be some kids at home, some kids in school, some teachers retiring, cleaning buildings, whatever, with the same price tag. That doesn't seem right to me.
All right, Darrell. Well, you provided some incredible insight, but one question I definitely have for you, and I want to make sure you get this in, because, there are a lot of issues that are pouring out in our feeds and in our world right now. But what is the one thing about education that you think isn't getting kind of the uplifting, the notice, eyes on it that we should be focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, right now there are schools that are beating the odds, and I think that's the important thing. And we actually knew where they were in states all across America and cities all across America who were helping all kids, and in particular low-income kids of color, become the best version of themselves, go on to college, change the world, and get justice for George Floyd. And I think when we have some sanity about our lives again, we should look at what is there because it's there already, and we should change public policy so there can be more of it.
All right. Well, this is Darrell Bradford. And Darrell, can you please tell us where can people find you on social media?
So I'm at Dyrnwyn, DYRNWYN, because I'm a huge nerd on Twitter. And you can find me talking about education and soccer there at any time.
Fantastic. And I will be sharing that article you wrote. That's very powerful. Thank you again, Darrell. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm here today to announce the program known as DACA is being rescinded.
We don't run our own country. We've lost our democracy, and all we have left is rage.
Where are the Democrats? I would be on every cable news channel screaming and yelling and talking about what the Republicans are doing right now.
How do you expect us to get excited to show up to the polls for these loser Democrats? How come we have nothing but cowards who'll never fight? Primaries are everything.
Building a great wall on the southern border.
You have politicians who fearmonger about disenfranchised groups.
The first attacker came through the visa lottery.
Now they are against legal immigrants.
Ending chain migration.
They don't want people from those countries coming here because they're fucking racist. This guy's an absolute monumental disgrace to all of us as Americans.
I ordered to launch precision strikes on targets.
That is what I was warning about for literally years on this program. This is what they promised they would do if they got into power, and what do you know? They did it.
I've now shown dozens of videos on the Young Turks of cops handcuffing people who are bleeding to death. His life means nothing. We have been trained to be cowards, so we're gonna handcuff that guy bleeding to death.
What does this law mean? These are all just basic BS coverings.
To every politician who is taking donations from the NRA, shame on you.
They said that this was impossible, but now we're beginning to move that boulder. And at the end, we'll get our democracy back. Primary the living hell out of these Democrats, and let's take over the party. That's a ghost ship. Let's board it, and let's take it.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watch the show in the morning.
Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
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 Mayweather will knock out Pacquiao. Floyd beats his wife.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
Welcome back to The Conversation on TYT. I'm Adrienne Lawrence, and for our second impactful voice today, we bring you Kenya Evelyn. She's a breaking news reporter for The Guardian US, and she's been doing some pretty incredible things in terms of enlightening us on COVID-19 as well as these protests. Thank you for joining us, Kenya.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Kenya. So you have written a very it's true, enlightening piece, talking really about COVID-19 fears and how they're intersecting with this George Floyd protest and this whole revolution and movement. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Before people even knew that, what we have later learned is that George Floyd essentially had the coronavirus himself. He was asymptomatic at the time. He was killed by a white Minneapolis police officer. And he was even economically impacted, which we have seen a majority of African Americans disproportionately are. He lost his job as a bouncer at a nearby club and restaurant after the shutdown with Minnesota's stay-at-home order. So before we even knew, though, those details about his personal life, people seem to resonate with this particular death by police, another instance of police brutality and a black man dying at the hands of white law enforcement. This just resonated with people in a different way, considering that essentially what I think Michael Aquino said beautifully online was that black people are dealing with 3 pandemics right now. We have a coronavirus pandemic that is disproportionately impacting black Americans, where we see 1/3 of all cases and COVID-19 deaths are coming from black Americans and even the Caribbean immigrant community in New York City. And that is also resonating with black Americans as we see numbers begin to tick. More than 23 states have announced numbers have been on the rise since states have begun lifting their economic restrictions and stay-at-home orders. And even among those states, 13 have reported having cases, the highest number of new cases at all during this pandemic. And that's disproportionately as well impacting black Americans. And then the second element of this pandemic is in the economic downturn, where hundreds of thousands of black Americans, a majority of whom are represented of those who, more than half of this country that make less than $40,000 a year, lost their job in the first few months of this pandemic. And so this second economic downturn, or this second pandemic, is impacting black Americans disproportionately as well. And that created this environment where, when you're dealing with the everyday institutional aspects of being black in America, where you are, particularly in Minnesota, 13 times more likely to die at the hands of police, this can represent an issue that just was essentially where people felt enough is enough. And we see these protests and demonstrations all around the country. And George Floyd became a representation of that, both in his life and in his death.
It's interesting, kind of those points that you make, in part because I've been having conversations with people where they ask us, aren't you afraid to go out and protest because you might get COVID-19? But the reality is, I might get killed by cops. My every day is one of living in distress, and my future looks bleak and uncertain as a result of the systemic oppression that goes on in our society. So going out into the streets is not necessarily my concern as opposed to my daily life. And I know you talked a little bit about already in terms of Caribbean individuals being targeted by police or being victims of police violence and brutality. And you do also kind of focus a little bit on the Caribbean diasporas. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One thing that gets lost in terms of the numbers of black Americans who are disproportionately dying in New York City is that many of these deaths that go underreported are of Caribbean immigrants. Those from, we see places with disproportionate number of cases, particularly in Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and then even newly places like the Dominican Republic and Cuba. And so where this is impacting diasporas is oftentimes these are the pillars of communities, those who have created staples of the diaspora, whether it be restaurants or whether it be media organizations. Oftentimes, these are the cornerstones of communities that have essentially become a dominant force in New York City. And we see that is not, so they're not exempt from a pandemic that is disproportionately impacting black Americans overall in this country. And that means they're also not exempt. We're seeing that they're also not exempt from the institutional issues that people even say is also a pandemic. Institutional racism is a pandemic in the United States. It's a public health issue that many doctors and health professionals officials are even recognizing. And Caribbean Americans aren't exempt from that. We've seen some instances where recent cases of those who were killed at the hands of law enforcement, particularly white law enforcement or even white vigilantes, have been Caribbean immigrants, those from Antigua, from Haiti, as well as Jamaica.
And it definitely speaks to the vulnerability of that population. But kind of switching to a kind of a somewhat of a related topic, you know, we've seen with these changes and this uprising how the media has been handling it. Like a number of people, fortunately, are moving away from the term African American as it is exclusive as opposed to being inclusive, and recognizing that not all people of color or Black people are African origins or African American, whether they may be Caribbean. Can you talk a little bit more about the changes you've recognized as a member of the media since we've had this uprising?
Absolutely. I think it's even just in learning that, 6 years ago, we were talking about Mike Brown in his body being on the pavement of Ferguson, Missouri for 4 hours. And before we could even see his body be taken away, we were digging into his background as a person to essentially what happens often disproportionately with Black people in this country and in our media is that we dig into their backgrounds to, in a way, justify what their fate, how they died. And in doing so, I think there were many mistakes made and many lessons learned for those of us in the media. One, and that we don't always take the police reports at first hand or at their word. And we are a little bit more scrutinous now, as we've seen, where even, a 75-year-old man could have tripped and fallen, but we actually see within a video that he was pushed by police officers and bleeding from his head. So, I think there's just mistakes made, or we're learning from mistakes made, those of us in the media, and how to delicately represent the diversity of being Black in America, how that can represent different communities of Black people in America, and how that can disproportionately reflect your experience here, whether you are an immigrant worker who makes up 75% of the meatpacking industry, those who particularly may be from Somalia or Ethiopia, in Minnesota, in places like Iowa and Kansas, or those from the Caribbean, as we see in New York City, or even those from Nigeria and Ghana and places like Texas and Atlanta. So, these are different communities of Black Americans who may not necessarily be descended from those of the enslaved who were enslaved in what became the United States, but they are instrumental parts of U.S. history and current experiences of disproportionately frontline workers and those who are also impacted by the institution of slavery and racism in this country.
All right. And speaking of U.S. history and also the legacy of slavery, a lot of people tend to think that slavery has origins in the United States, that we created it. But what's the real?
The real is actually what we know to be plantation slavery has its origins in Barbados. The slave codes written in Barbados became what we know to be the basis of plantation slavery, and they're pretty detailed. I actually had some years ago visit the Barbados nations, and then traveled south throughout the United States, became cotton plantations, but it has its origins from the Caribbean and then also its origins from those that were captured in West Africa. So no, did slavery was it invented or created in the United States? No. Was it unique in being the foundation of the U.S. wealth? Absolutely. But no, chattel slavery and plantation-based slavery is specifically from the United States, is explicitly derived from the slave codes of Barbados.
You are a historian among them. And we only have about a few minutes left, but there's a question that I've been dying to ask you, because essentially you're on the front lines of things and you have your finger on the pulse, you know what's going on. And, we've seen a lot less coverage in terms of the protests and the uprising. Where do you think things will go in terms of media coverage, given that we know these things are still going on?
Absolutely. I think what we're seeing right now is that there doesn't seem to be, or doesn't appear to be, a direct correlation between protests and demonstrations and what is coincidentally, at least initially, a rise in cases as states reopen across the country, a rise in cases of the coronavirus. And so being that, even Dr. Fauci came out and said that there are ways that you can safely protest, that you can safely demonstrate.
an English muffin with a hash brown and coffee. And I'm still waiting, and I'm still waiting. So I pull up forward, and a girl comes out with my coffee, and just the coffee. And she hands it to me, and that's all she hands me is the coffee. I said, don't bother with the food, because right now I'm too nervous to take a meal from McDonald's, because I can't see it being made. But please, just give us a break. Please, just give us a break. I don't know how much more I can take.
Yeah, you deserve a break today at McDonald's.
Welcome to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. Joining us today is John Idarola because it's Wednesday. What's up, John?
It's good. I'm in a perfectly normal mood. How are you doing?
Man, that is, I think that might be the first time you've lied about something. Or at least the first time I've caught you lying about something.
That you know of. But no, I am very happy to be doing the show with you. That's the truth.
Well, I'm happy to have you do the show with me as well, John. I wanted to update the audience on how we're doing with our fundraising effort. So let's take a quick look at the thermometer. And, I don't remember what the number was yesterday, but this number seems pretty impressive. So we're at $92,033. Every month, we are trying to raise $200,000 to keep TYT sustainable, not indefinitely. We're only doing this fundraiser till the end of the year. And thank you to everybody who's contributed. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do this show and get by on the, very few resources we get as independent media. So thank you again. Yeah. Lots of news to get to today. Go ahead.
I don't know, day by day, but I do think the last Wednesday show we did, we were at about 59. So that's pretty good for a week. People have been very supportive.
Nice. There's a lot of numbers flying around, right? In producing the show. So you just kind of like lose track of which number is associated to which issue. So this is a number that makes me happy. Thank you so much to all of our supporters and all of our members, all the people who have consistently supported us throughout the years. And of course, you can become a member and get exclusive content by going to tyt.com/join. Alrighty, we start off with some updates to stories that we've covered throughout the week. This is a pretty big development, so let's get right to it. The Atlanta police officer who shot and killed Rayshard Brooks by shooting him literally in the back has been charged criminally. These are charges that were filed by the Fulton County District Attorney, Paul Howard. And the most important charge in question is the felony murder charge that he's facing. The district attorney has also charged the cop in this case, Garrett Wolf, 11 charges in total. So not only is he charged, but his colleague who was on the scene at the time is also facing 3 charges. His name is Devin Brosnan, and he is cooperating with authorities and has agreed to testify against his colleague, Garrett Wolf, who is the individual who opened fire and shot Brooks in the back. 2 of those bullets did hit him, and he died later in the hospital. And this is what people were asking for. They were asking for criminal charges, and these criminal charges have been filed, and Rolf will have his day in court.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, I think a very minor version of what people want is for this sort of story to not be a story. First of all, because it wouldn't happen, because they wouldn't be trained to decide that it's easier to just shoot at a man in his back rather than actually chase him, or, I mean, God forbid, let him go and have to track him down later. But also that if something like this happens, yeah, that's what it's expected. He murdered this guy, he gets charged with murder, goes to jail. That's what it should be. It shouldn't be like, oh my God, thanks to the protests, it looks like maybe there will actually be justice. It shouldn't be a substantive or sort of newsworthy sort of consideration. But it is. And they didn't want to chase a guy. And so they shot him in the back. It's madness. And then everything they did afterward, like, imagine if like, let's say that they actually thought that this had to happen. It wasn't just a matter of how dare you defy me or make me chase you. After you shoot the person, how do you not do everything you possibly can with the training that you've got to save the person's life? They're not a threat to you anymore. They're not going anywhere. You don't even have to jog after them. You just let it happen. A couple minutes go by. You're worried about paperwork or, oh man, I wonder if there were cameras that caught this insane thing I did, rather than saving a person's life while it could potentially still have been saved.
I don't know why it shouldn't be controversial to say that there needs to be a high standard when officers use deadly force. That's really what this discussion is about. It's not about minimizing the severity of drunk driving. It's not to paint an angelic picture of every person who's been caught up in these cases of police brutality. This is about whether or not we're comfortable living in a society where cops get to decide whether you live or die, right? They get to carry out whatever version of justice is in their minds, and they get to do so without, allowing you to have your day in court, right? We're supposed to have those protections. People are supposed to have those rights. And so as the retired LAPD sergeant shared with CNN, it was a video that we shared earlier this week when we covered this story, you're supposed to, the police department, when they come across a situation like this where someone flees, and by the way, they did check Rayshard Brooks to see if he had any lethal weapons on him. He did not. So they knew that he wasn't an imminent threat to their lives, right? Mm-hmm. As the retired LAPD sergeant said in that CNN interview, you're supposed to create a perimeter in that area in order to catch him safely, put him in custody, and make sure that justice is served in that regard, right? And they didn't do that. Shooting someone in the back, I mean, the very nature of that indicates that he was not an imminent threat to that cop. Yeah. And you don't get to decide. You don't get to be the judge, jury, and executioner. We're supposed to have, again, we're supposed to have some level of, I don't know, just
empathy.
I know, but we're not allowed to have empathy. We're not allowed to do an honest analysis of what's going on in this country. And I just don't understand it. I don't think anyone would be comfortable knowing that their family member died because anyone opened fire without giving them the opportunity to defend themselves in court, right? Yeah. Anyway, so sorry for that whole spiel. It's just so frustrating that it's a difficult concept for so many people to grasp.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and also really fast. One other quick consideration: you're in the parking lot of a Wendy's. Obviously, this is not off in some remote area in the woods or the desert. You're firing your gun totally needlessly. Not only did you kill someone, but you easily could have hit an innocent bystander nearby. When you fire your weapon, that bullet goes where it's going to go, and there are people around. You could have hit someone. There are people just filming in the area, and so that's incredibly dangerous. And also, I understand that we're in a particular type of bubble in that our job is to pay attention and try to be as tapped into the news and what's going on around the country as possible. And so we're going to be more cognizant of, what these big news stories are, what the moment is in the country. But imagine how many stories like this have come up just in the midst of all of the time since the protest started. That the nation is focused on excessive force and brutality. And that wasn't enough, let alone not to stop him from pulling his gun and shooting at this guy as he ran away. Like, basic humanity should. You should be trained to not do that. All of those considerations. The fact that people are filming, but even the fact that we're all focused like a laser on police brutality wasn't enough to stay his hand in this case, and in so many cases over the past few weeks.
And by the way, we are learning more about what happened and what Devin Brosnan's, role in all of this was. So new reporting indicates that after the shooting, Rolf said, quote, "I got him." We knew about that already. And then kicked him. We didn't know about that until recently. And Brosnan then stood on Brooks's shoulder. And Howard said, and that's the district attorney that I was referring to earlier, the officers did not provide medical aid to Brooks for more than 2 minutes after he was shot. Look, it's just about, questioning whether we're comfortable with this. We're supposed to, again, have a justice system that deems us innocent until proven guilty. And that means that no one on the streets, including cops, should have the ability to decide whether we live or die if we do not pose an imminent threat to their lives, period. Yeah. All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit. And there's a lot going on in the country. And I know that our coverage of COVID hasn't been as consistent as, we've been focusing on other issues in the country, especially police brutality and racism. But I think it's time to do an in-depth analysis of what's really happening with this pandemic and how we're actually moving backwards when it comes to COVID. So there are dozens of states in the U.S. that are experiencing a pretty significant uptick in the number of new coronavirus cases. And to make matters worse, we are hearing nothing but complete and utter lies from the federal government on how various states are doing. Now, the entire picture is not bleak. There are some states that have shown some improvement, but when it comes to various states, and I think you're going to notice a trend here, including Florida, Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, there is an uptick, and part of the reason why is because of the premature opening of businesses in that area. Yes, there have been demonstrations and protests as well. And more importantly, there hasn't really been any leadership or any emphasis on the importance of using masks by our federal government. So let me give you some of these details. Let's start off with Florida. Florida recorded almost 2,800 new coronavirus cases on Monday of this week. That's the highest number of new and confirmed cases in a single day the state has seen, and that's according to the Florida Department of Health. Now, Governor Ron DeSantis absolutely refuses to ever shut down the state again. He told reporters back on May 20th that there actually wouldn't even be a second wave. But unfortunately, we're seeing the second wave already when this wave was expected to happen later in the year in fall. So Ron DeSantis said, quote, "We succeeded, and I think people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative. It challenges their assumption. So they got to try to find a boogeyman." More than 2 million people, by the way, in the United States have been infected with coronavirus, and 116,962 have died. And that's according to Johns Hopkins University. Health experts are warning that more infections and deaths are in store as states continue their reopening plans. And by the way, I know that we are very critical of the politicians in these red states, but it would be unfair of me to not mention that we're seeing an increase in California as well. And businesses in California have been opening. And I think that there, of course, are going to be consequences to that if people aren't implementing social distancing.
Yeah, it's really going to come down to when we see these rises coming in particular states or particular regions, is there going to be something done in response? So we've had day after day after day in Texas, for instance, of record-breaking hospitalizations. Not like hospitalizations during the second wave, just hospitalizations overall, more than during the first wave. And I know that Dr. Fauci says we're still in the first. It's dishonest to say that we're done with that. I mean, think about it. If at the very beginning of this entire process, like 3 months ago, I had told you that like 400 to 900 people will be dying every day. That's sort of the recent numbers over the past week or two. You would think that was absolutely horrendous. Well, that's just the norm that nobody even really pays much attention to that we have right now. And yeah, you're right. California is seeing a rise as well. I just saw in LA County specifically, so not America, not California, just LA County, we passed 3,000 deaths. Imagine one thing killing 3,000 people just in the city that we're in right now, let alone the more than 120,000 that have died nationally. It is insane. It is suicidal that we ignore it to the extent that we do, and that we tolerate so much death, and that when the numbers start to rise, we'll see if DeSantis and if Abbott take it seriously, but so far they've given no indication that anything will be done. I'm not even talking about lockdowns. They're obviously not going to do any lockdowns or anything like that. All of their voters think that lockdowns are, that they're ways that you set fire to the Constitution or whatever. But they're not even asking for masks. In Texas right now, you can go to the supermarket, no mask. Totally fine. It's so weird that the cases are going up, considering this incredibly lax situation.
Yeah. So regarding the masks, there have been studies that show that masks are 85% effective in preventing the spread of coronavirus, which is why it's so important. Please, if you're out there, if you're, grocery shopping, please think about the lives you save simply by wearing a mask. There's so many people who have coronavirus, but they're asymptomatic. A very good friend of mine is a therapist, and she called me recently and she was like, hey, I got to go get tested because I found out that a colleague of mine did test positive, and she's completely asymptomatic. So there are plenty of people who are asymptomatic. You might have it and be asymptomatic, completely unaware that you're spreading it. So my point is, be smarter than what the Trump administration is advocating for, okay? Protect your life, protect the lives of others. Please wear a mask. And I will say there is a significant difference between some of the Trump-supporting protesters and the protesters who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Because if you look at videos, they seem to take the mask situation very seriously. And, they've made a decision that this movement is important to them, and they're willing to go out there and fight for justice. And I respect that. But definitely wear a mask and do what you can to prevent spreading, this horrible virus to other people. I do also want to share a little snippet from Anthony Fauci's interview with NPR's 1A. It looks like he and the president are not having as many conversations as they used to when it comes to responding to the pandemic. Let's take a listen.
Tell us, when was the last time you actually spoke with President Trump?
Not last week, but the week before.
Okay.
I spoke with him when we made the presentation to explain to him our vaccine development efforts. So it was 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
So again, we're in the middle of a pandemic where 21 states are seeing an upward trend of new coronavirus cases. The president has already checked out. He is not having as much communication with Anthony Fauci as he should be. And he's also, of course, in the process of getting ready for this massive Tulsa, Oklahoma rally, his first rally since March. And he is not encouraging people to wear masks during this rally.
Yeah. They say that they are going to be handing out masks to everyone there. But the camera's going to be rolling. We'll get to see, given a mask. The Trump campaign gives you a mask as a Trump fan. We'll see if they actually wear it. It's like if Trump wins after doing nothing through the most horrendous domestic emergency that I pray we will experience through the course of our life, think about all that it will say about the expectations that people have of their leadership, what they'll allow, what they're okay with. He was sort of pretending to take it seriously when he was wasting our time with talk about bleach and UV lights and, hydroxychloroquine and stuff like that. That at least his mind was ostensibly on the pandemic. He doesn't even do that. Maybe a comment yesterday about how they developed an AIDS vaccine, which isn't true. And that's really about it for him. He doesn't care. It's like a little baby. He got bored with it and he moved on. And now he just wants to stand in a rally and have people clap for him.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we have more updates on coronavirus for you, and you don't want to miss it. Lots of important details there. And then later in the show, yes, of course, we're going to talk about some of the allegations that John Bolton is lodging against the Trump administration in his upcoming book. Lots of drama there. We'll have that and more when we return.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years,
Right.
believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Cenk Uygur joins us.
We are progressive and unapologetically so. Very happy to say that millennial and Gen Z generations are massively progressive along with us.
Democrats, they've been so weak for so long. For God's sake, fight for your side.
I would not like to compromise with Republicans. I would like to defeat them. Lynn, do you support Donald Trump?
Yes, I like Donald Trump.
Well, that's why we think you're racist. The 5 black kids in Central Park did not commit the rape. He said, who cares? Keep him in prison anyway. They probably did something. He's a terrible guy. Very fine people on the side chanting, Jews will not replace us. He says we should ban all Muslims. Well, that's bigotry by definition. He said it during the campaign trail over and over again. Called Latinos criminals and rapists. See, you're used to Republicans being strong on television and Democrats cowering. New day in America. Progressives, we actually fight back. ShopTYT.com has new shirts like this one. And you're thinking, Cenk, what is that one? I can't see it other than the black. Yes, so I'll show it to you. If you can read this, you're not practicing social distancing. Yes! Now, you were practicing social distancing. This is over video. But overall, you get it. ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the Army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT, Anna and John with you. I wanted to remind you all that if you are online right now, which if you're watching this, you're definitely online. Make sure you protect your online activity. Use a VPN and use one that you can get a fat discount on. And one of our partners, NordVPN, will give you 70% off for 3 years, plus you get a free month when you sign up specifically at nordvpn.com/TYT. All right, I wanted to read some member comments, and there are some great ones that I wanted to mention. So first, Cousin Vinny thanks us for mentioning California as one of the states that's seeing an uptick in coronavirus cases. No problem. I mean, it's devastating. We live in California, but Vinny is absolutely right. We've experienced a rise in the number of coronavirus cases for 3 to 4 weeks now. And we didn't avoid mentioning it for any like nefarious purpose. It's just there's so much going on in the world with the news. And like I say, every day is frustrating because I feel like we don't get to so many things that I want to talk about. Mickey C says, glad the other cop will testify, but his career is over and he will need to watch his back for a very long time. And by the way, he is facing 3 charges of his own. And my guess is his decision to testify is to, cover his own butt. And in the super chat comments, we have Latoya Williams, who says, I upgraded my membership. Go TYT. Thank you. And McCowell D says, I was wondering if you all had covered the story of the missing Texas soldier, Vanessa Guillen, yet. No, I actually have not come across that story. I promise you we will look into it. Thank you for that tip. All right, well, let's move on to the rest of the news because, unfortunately, we have a lot of misinformation coming from the Trump administration on this pandemic. So, the Wall Street Journal has decided to publish an op-ed penned by Vice President Mike Pence, which completely denies that there is a second wave of coronavirus. In fact, he attempts to completely rewrite recent history by lying about Trump's disastrous handling of coronavirus. I am not going to regurgitate or repeat his lies, but I will debunk some of the nonsense that he shared in that op-ed, which is going to lead to people losing their lives. Let's not sugarcoat it in any way. He writes, the media has taken to sounding the alarm bells over a second wave of coronavirus infections. Such panic is overblown. Thanks to the leadership of President Trump and the courage and compassion of the American people, our public health system is far stronger than it was 4 months ago, and we are winning the fight against the invisible enemy. Now, 21 states are seeing an uptick in the number of new coronavirus cases. Many of those states are red states. California is included in that list, even though California is not a red state. But this goes to show you that this is a severe virus that is easily spread through human contact. It's airborne. The only state that seems to have gotten it 100% right is Vermont, where their numbers have gone down drastically. So Vermont has seen a decrease of at least 50% of new coronavirus cases. But anyway, going back to the lies told by Mike Pence, Eliza Relman over at Business Insider did a good job debunking point by point all of the nonsense in this Wall Street Journal op. She writes, Pence celebrated that the daily average infection rate has dropped to about 20,000 new cases per day. Okay, let's just stop for a second, John. Who would celebrate 20,000 new people contracting this virus per day? Okay, fine. So that's what's happening in the Trump administration. They're celebrating this. It's down from a high of about 30,000 in April. And he pointed out that daily COVID-19 deaths in the U.S. have declined to 750 over the last 5 days. The highest daily death count came on May 1st when 2,909 people in the United States died of coronavirus in 24 hours. Now, here's what's important to keep in mind. As Relman writes, the vice president failed to mention that coronavirus cases are on the rise in over 20 states, 21 to be exact, many of the same places that were quick to loosen social distancing orders and reopen businesses. And overall, new COVID-19 cases in the U.S. have begun to plateau, not decline. Intensive care units in Arizona, for instance, are now overwhelmed after the state's governor was slow to shut down and, of course, quick to reopen. John, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Arizona's certainly one of the rough ones. I was just, I follow a Twitter account that compiles daily information, and Texas, once again, broke records. Not in cases, although, yes, that too, hospitalizations. And so, and the reason I always stress hospitalizations is because the right-wingers are always going to come back and say, well, we're testing more. And like Trump says, it's a double-edged sword. More tests, you're going to have more cases. Okay, maybe. But tests don't magically require people to have extended stays in hospitals. And that's what we're seeing. Hospitalizations are going down in some states. They've fallen drastically in New York and Illinois, New Jersey, a number of other states outside of the South, the Southwest. But Texas is going up. Arizona's going up. Other states like North Carolina, South Carolina are going up as well, although not as fast. That should change policy. That should scare people into pushing for something, because what it seems like we're seeing, and this is to some extent what we had predicted, was the entire country was slow to shut down, perhaps understandably so, I guess. I don't know. And there was no leadership, certainly. The places that were initially hit are the places you would expect. They're coastal blue states that people travel to, largely. And so the entire country shut down. Much of the country hadn't really been hit by it that much at that point. Those parts of the country were the quickest to reopen. And now, what do you know? It's starting to spread. And those areas are probably not going to shut down. Texas is probably not going to initiate a statewide lockdown. And so those 2,800 people that are hospitalized today as a resulting coronavirus, in 2 weeks, how many of them will have died? And how many more people will be sick by then?
Right. I mean, I think it's also important to note, a lot of health experts are saying, there's a little bit of, there's a few days, a week between when a person contracts the virus and when they end up in the hospital. And there are predictions by these health experts that the number of people checking into the hospital because they have this virus is likely to increase. Now, it's different state by state, but one thing that I do want to point out is that there's this narrative arguing that the reason why we're seeing an uptick is because we've actually improved with testing. And that is not something that explains the uptick in coronavirus cases. I'll explain why in just a minute. But first, I want you to hear from Mike Pence, who had a call with governors telling them all sorts of misleading information and encouraging them to implement the misinformation and the bad advice that's coming from the Trump administration. Take a listen.
I would just encourage you all, as we talk about these things, make sure and continue to explain to your citizens the magnitude of increase in testing. In most of the cases where we are seeing some marginal rising number, that's more a result of the extraordinary work you're doing expanding testing.
So unfortunately, that's not true. I really wish it were true, but it's not. So let's take Oklahoma, for example. The Oklahoman wrote about this, and here's what the journalist Randy Ellis had to say. The spike in confirmed COVID-19 cases can't be attributed to more testing. The state actually performed more tests the week of May 17th, but the number of tests that came back positive in the week that followed was only 1.8%. Last week, it was 4.6% of the tests coming back positive. Mm-hmm. So it's not, my point is, and the point of health experts is, no, this is not because we've increased testing. We're seeing either less testing or a stable amount of testing week to week, right? No difference in the amount of testing. And we're still seeing more people test positive in these 21 states. It's just devastating. And the fact that governors are encouraged to spread this kind of misinformation by our vice president is truly pathetic, because people are going to lose their lives. It's just unacceptable.
Yeah, and aside from just the obvious human cost of if it's allowed in all of these states to continue to spread, and to some extent they seem to be very willing to hide this information. So like one of the reasons I'm focusing on some states' hospitalization numbers is because some states don't even report it. Like Florida has had a huge upsurge in cases. Oddly, 2 to 3 weeks after their full reopening, the cases have gone 3 times higher than they were during the first wave. But Florida doesn't report hospitalization, so I have no idea. I can't say. Weird that they're being so, keeping their cards so close to the chest, or they're close to the vest on that. But anyway, what I don't understand, aside from the human cost, is as an electoral strategy, every week we get a week closer to the election, and they seem to, like, this is a strategy that's, the end goal seems to be, we want these numbers to be as high as they were initially as we launch into the general election. I just don't get it. Pragmatically, why wouldn't you want to protect people when your jobs are on the line?
I want to just read a message from one of our viewers, Isabel Amelia Thompson, who contributed to TYT through YouTube Super Chat. Very generous amount. Thank you so much. And this is her message. I think it's important to read it because I'm really down for obvious reasons. It's just these types of stories are pretty devastating to think about all day, every day. But she says, I found TYT through Google, first in search results. And Cenk was sort of losing his bad word over the mistreatment of trans people. And Anna and her salt are 75% of the reason why I stayed. Keep up the truth fight. Anna is my spirit animal. Hashtag I want that cool shirt. Hashtag I love you too, John. So thank you so much, Isabel. I really appreciate it. Like I need that support. It's not beneath me to admit that. It's tough. One of our viewers actually the significant other of one of our viewers wrote in today on Twitter and said, hey, my partner is obsessed with your show, but it's having like a negative impact on his mental health. So Can you address that? And you know what? Yes, I will address it. It's a very difficult time for a lot of people. Consuming this kind of news, thinking about these difficult topics is hard on everyone who actually cares, who's genuine and sincere about wanting to change the system. So I think it's important, to take a breather from this news when you can, and just kind of take a deep breath, go for a walk, which is what I do when I'm really, really stressed out, and just hang in there, guys. I'm really inspired by the protesters out there. I'm inspired by Black Lives Matter. The fact that they were completely defamed over and over again, but they persisted and they're pushing for real change. So there are positive things to focus on too. It's just that we're in the middle of this fight, and sometimes it's hard to lose track of where we're at. All right, well, let's move on to what's going on in Tulsa. We have time, we can do it. So Oklahoma is unfortunately one of the 21 states that are experiencing a troubling surge in new coronavirus cases, and the numbers reveal the consequences of businesses opening early. Now, of course, it's important to focus on what's happening in Oklahoma and Tulsa specifically, since Donald Trump is planning on doing his rally in a few days. He's going to do his first rally since March in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, one of the health experts at OU Medicine told the Oklahoman this: we have reached a peak that is higher than at any other point in the pandemic here in the state. We are bending the curve, sadly, in the wrong direction. Again, this is a medical expert, a health expert in the state of Oklahoma who is concerned about this troubling trend. Yesterday actually marked the highest single day total of new coronavirus cases in the state of Oklahoma. Tulsa County actually surpassed Oklahoma County on Monday and now leads the state in the cumulative number of COVID-19 tests with 1,729 cases. Oklahoma County has reported 1,673 positive cases. Now, unfortunately, Trump is still planning on doing this rally, John. And when he was recently asked by reporters how Oklahoma fares in the coronavirus numbers, Trump just did what he typically does. He lied. Take a look.
Well, Oklahoma's done very well. I just spoke to the governor. He's very excited about it. Governor Stitt, who's done a terrific job. Mike, I think you can maybe speak to this. He's done a great job. Oklahoma's at a very low number. They've done really fantastic work. They have a pretty new, magnificent arena. As you probably have heard, we have a 22,000 seat arena, but I think we're going to also take the convention hall next door, and that's going to hold 40,000.
Yeah, I just feel pretty sick to my stomach. And as you guys know, anyone who goes to his rally needs to essentially agree. It's like a waiver indicating that if they contract the virus by going to this rally, they cannot hold Trump or the campaign accountable.
Yeah. He just lied. They just set a record yesterday in number of cases. Now, they're not doing as bad as some places. Maybe say that, stress that, rather than just lying. And lying to hold an event that is definitely going to get some people sick. I mean, think about the other cases where we've warned about this sort of thing, when they held an election and we said it seems crazy because of coronavirus, and then it turned out that people got sick as a result. These big events, do we know of, in the past few months, any other 40 to 60,000 person gathering where people just crammed into a big building? Like, has there been anything? Like, concerts were canceled, conventions were canceled. How? And the thing too, he mentioned there that they're going to put an additional 40,000 people in a secondary convention center. And so we talked about this in the damage report, and I showed it on the map. It's like 2 blocks away from the place where the actual rally is. So they're putting 40,000 people, twice as big of a crowd, in another building that Trump isn't going to be in. Mm-hmm. So, like, maybe they'll have big screens or something like that?
I don't get it. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, this is something that you can watch on television if you're passionate about Trump. But, also, let me just correct my answer, because there have been mass gatherings in the context of these protests, right? And so this is, look, so let's play devil's advocate, because I think that this argument is made with a sincerity by some people who mean well. They're not all crazy lunatic Trump supporters. There are some people who are like, look, if we're going to be critical of these political gatherings, then if we're concerned about the spread of coronavirus, can't we say the same thing about these protests? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you can say that. But I guess we should also think about priorities too, right? And so I just think that fighting for change because people keep getting murdered by cops is different from attending like a WWE-like political rally that you have fun at because you get to yell and shout and talk about how much you hate people who are different than you. I just think that's different, right? Those are my political values, though. I mean,
No, you don't have to apologize for this. So again, like Dr. Fauci said yesterday, outside is better than inside. No crowd is better than crowd. Small crowd is better than big crowd. This is a gigantic indoor crowd. It's literally the worst case scenario, and it isn't pushing for an end to police brutality. And they wear masks at the protests. We're gonna see. I could be wrong. They're handing out masks to everybody in Tulsa. Maybe we'll flip on the TV and it'll just be masks. I'm guessing probably not. But however much lower a priority going to a rally, I think, should be than, trying to stop cops from killing people, you have to admit that going to a 40,000 person rally that isn't even the Trump rally has got to be a lower priority. To just 100%. Cram into a stadium, to not even be at the rally, to risk getting coronavirus, to not even hear him speak is madness. But that's what they're doing. And Trump added that after all of the criticism of the rally. He doubled down saying, no, I'm going to expose 3 times as many people, and they're not even going to be in the room with me.
Exactly. And by the way, I just want to note that there's a difference in culture between the two different groups, right? Protesters understand the importance of wearing masks. They take coronavirus seriously, right? And not every single person, but what you see in video after video after video is that they're not having some like allergic reaction to wearing masks. When it comes to Trump supporters, though, the situation is very different. The Oklahoman spoke to a number of Trump supporters who are already camping out for the rally. And they seem to not think this is a big deal at all. I'm going to go to the last 3 graphics in this story, starting with James Massery, who's a Trump supporter, said the following. I'm sorry, this is from Tulsa World, not the Oklahoman. So James Massery tells Tulsa World, whether I get it, whether or not I get it, it doesn't bother me in the least. If I get it, I'll deal with it. If it takes me out, it's just going to make me mad that I can't vote for Trump in this coming election. Harrison Grimward, who's another Trump supporter who's been camping out, I'm sorry, Harrison Grimward is actually the reporter, and he talks about Daryl Henry, who's also camping out for the rally. And he said, one must not fear. He was also quoted as saying, we've paid enough sacrifices, we've taken enough precautions, and let's get back to it. Let's get back to opening our country. So there's just a difference in culture and a difference in taking this seriously. And I think that's important to point out. We have to take a break. When we come back, we have more for you, including, I can't believe this is actually real, but there is a right-wing extremist group who refer to themselves as Boogaloos. We'll give you the details on that when we come back.
Here we are at the donor wall again. As you guys know, this is my house, and put you up in my house, on my wall, which I look at about 10, 20 times a day. TYT wall, why does that look different than everything else? Because my daughter wrote that one. She's very proud though, okay? So, you know how to contribute to tyt.com/go. These wonderful, wonderful folks have given $1,000 or more, so we super appreciate it. And I want to thank you guys, and this is how we do it. Chris Williams, okay? He's on here. That's wonderful. Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate it. And next up is Dick Epler. Thank you, guys. All right, so again, I try to imagine stories for every one of you guys that are on this wall that I look at so often. But if you can, write it in so I know. Like, oh yeah, Dick lives in St. Louis. I don't know that he does, okay? Anyway, if you want to see what the perks are that you get for either $1,000, well, one of them is this. But you also get a hoodie that says We Press On, has an awesome logo. I love it. And only so many of you will ever have that hoodie, which is kind of cool. I have one too. But there's so many other perks, and that's tyt.com/presson, where you could find out those perks. So next up is Teresa Nestaby. Teresa, also awesome, on the wall of awesomeness. You are, in a sense, the watchers on the wall, keeping that light going in the darkness. Meg H. All right, one last thing, guys. So Anna and I today on the post game had this moment where we got a little despondent, right? But whenever I look up at this, I get hopeful again. I love you guys for it. tyt.com/go.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich. Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy.
Tick-tock.
I think we're going to win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're going to have the House, and I think we're going to have the presidency.
Tick-tock.
And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're going to run you out of town, and we're going to have an actual democracy in this country.
November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
As we're all shut in now and trying to watch as much stuff as possible, pro tip, you actually can get more from Netflix and other services if you switch to watching them from a different country. But Cenk, how would I do that? Hello, nordvpn.com/TYT. If you do that, you can switch viewing it from Albania. That's amazing. Plus, you get a free month. Plus, you get 70% off of a 3-year plan. Let's do it now. nordvpn.com/TYT.
That's how you do when I smacked it back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like dates.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna and John with you. All right, I want to make sure we fit in as many stories as possible, so I'll go through this quickly. Oh Boy says, a lot of companies put out BLM messages to show support for the movement. I don't know if TYT did or not, and I love that I don't have to wonder where they stand because they've been yelling it for years. Much love to TYT. Yeah, so look, I find it super cheesy when corporations like put out these like messages of support when they've ignored issues like this for a long time, which is why, like, for me, the performative stuff, it just turns me off. And I hope that no one is under the impression that because I don't put out like this, like, here is my official statement on Black Lives Matter. Like, it doesn't mean I don't care about it. I care about it deeply. I just don't want to do like surface level, shallow BS that doesn't really matter. You know, that's kind of where I'm at with messages. Yeah. Harles Macy says Trump is going full blown Jim Jones, but the deaths will come slowly. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about something associated with the right wing. It's pretty devastating. So, two men who are part of a right-wing extremist group have been arrested and are facing federal charges in connection to the murder of a federal officer. So this tragic story starts on May 29th when a protective security officer named David Patrick Underwood was gunned down in Oakland by a man named Stephen Carrillo, who's part of the so-called Boogaloo Boys. And look, I'm going to be honest with you. The first time I heard about this group, I didn't take it seriously. And I learned that Boogaloo and the ridiculous name of this extremist group is on purpose, so people don't take it seriously. But unfortunately, there are members of this extremist group who have used the Black Lives Matter protests as a cover to carry out acts of extreme violence, to murder officers. And in this case, there was the federal officer who was shot and killed. And in the second case, there was yet another cop who was shot. And so I'm going to go to this video where a CNN reporter explains in detail how this case developed, and then I'll give you some more details. Let's take a look.
As the Black Lives Matter protests were taking place and law enforcement was trying to keep people safe during these protests, these two men were in communication that they were not connected to these protests at all, but they were going to use it as a cover to scope out and kill law enforcement. So on May 29th, they drove to the Oakland federal courthouse, the federal building. They staked out two law enforcement officers who were outside the federal building. One of them was Pat Underwood, and then in the drive-by shooting, murdered Underwood. Then there was a call from the public, asked for help from law enforcement to the public to look for the getaway vehicle, in the vehicle that was used in the drive-by shooting, a van. Well, the public then responded, and law enforcement on June 6th was brought to Carrillo's house, and it was there that he also then attacked the sheriff's deputies who were responding, killing Sergeant Damon Guts Willer.
So there are both federal charges and state charges in connection to what Carrillo did. Federal prosecutors on Tuesday charged Carrillo with murder and attempted murder and leveled aiding and abetting charges against Robert Alvin Justice Jr., who has admitted to serving as the getaway driver in the courthouse ambush that happened. In addition to those federal charges, by the way, Carrillo faces a murder charge in the slaying of Santa Cruz County Sheriff Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller, as was mentioned toward the end of that video. So I'll give you more details about what this group is about, but these two people had communication. They had an online exchange where they made it clear that they saw the Black Lives Matter movement as an opportunity, as a way to, like, I guess, camouflage themselves to carry out these acts of violence. And then Black Lives Matter protesters would be blamed for it, of course. Now, luckily, there was enough of an investigation to figure out that this is actually, this was carried out by right-wing extremists. But it's just, I'm happy they're in custody, but that ideology still exists. These are anti-government, extreme right-wing individuals.
Yeah, and apparently so committed to this idea that the shooter apparently scrawled catchphrases of the Boogaloo movement in his own blood after being shot. Yeah, and this is only, exactly what we said would happen initially. I mean, I assumed that they would try to kill protesters, and there are other right-wingers that are doing that. This one decided to attack cops, and presumably to get the cops to then harshly attack the protesters, which the cops apparently didn't need any stimulus to do. They did it on their own. And this is what we predicted. And probably equally as easy to predict is that the right wing, which was really interested in this case, stopped talking about it the second they found out that this guy was involved in the Boogaloo movement. And you had tweets from Charlie Kirk about, like, did his life not matter too? With a little thinking face. Has no update. Hasn't said anything since we found out. Not interested. They're on something else. They don't care about violence. They care about blaming it on Antifa, which has oddly been absent for weeks and weeks and weeks now. It seems mostly like right-wingers, the KKK, and militia members that are shooting people and trying to run them down all over the country.
Well, let me give you a little more information about this Boogaloo group. So they have one main uniting theme behind their so-called movement. It's the belief in and support for a civil war against a tyrannical government. Beyond that, the Boogaloo ideology is flexible. They like to dress up in Hawaiian shirts because when they go to, like, for instance, Black Lives Matter protests, they consider it like going to the party because they see it as an opportunity to carry out the violence that they want to carry out. Many of those who claim an allegiance to the far-right movement, which is made up largely of young white men, frequently carry rifles and espouse a need to defend the Second Amendment. According to the Anti-Defamation League, some Boogaloo adherents oppose government overreach and advance libertarian ideas embraced by militias and gun rights groups. Others openly spread white supremacist rhetoric and encourage a race war. So, I mean, look, we talked about that anti-government militia in New Mexico. One of those members opened fire against protesters, and the protester remains in the hospital in critical condition. This is an ongoing problem. This isn't something that sprung up out of nowhere, by the way. Like, there have been issues with right-wing extremism in this country for a long time now. And I remember in 2009, under the Obama administration, there was a tremendous amount of pressure to disband a specific group of investigators within the Department of Homeland Security who were tasked with investigating homegrown right-wing extremists. Conservative politicians didn't like it. They fought the Obama administration on it, and that group did disband. And there are consequences to that, and we're unfortunately dealing with it today. All right, let's get to the final story because the brazen nature of this elected official is just absolutely disgusting. Protesters continue to topple Confederate statues across the country, while in some parts of the country, elected officials refuse to move the monuments, even if the monuments are on public land. So, for instance, in northeastern Mississippi, one elected official argued that, look, the real problem is slavery. But it's not that slavery was the problem, it's what happened after slavery. He alleges that it made African Americans, quote, dependent. So this is in Lowndes County. It's 53% white, 45% black. And in this northeastern Mississippi county, supervisors voted along racial lines against moving a Confederate monument that has stood outside the county courthouse in Columbus since 1912. The monument depicts a Confederate soldier and says the South fought for a noble cause. Let me just remind you that noble cause in their minds is slavery. They fought to continue enslaving people in this country. At one point during the meeting, a white supervisor, Harry Sanders, said moving the monument would solve nothing and would be an attempt to erase history. After the meeting, Sanders, a Republican, of course, was quoted by the Commercial Dispatch as saying that other groups of people who had also been mistreated in the past, he cited Irish, Italian, Polish, and Japanese immigrants, were able to successfully assimilate afterwards. And then let me give you this disgusting quote, John, and I want to hear your thoughts. The only ones, he says, that are having the problems Guess who? The African Americans. You know why? In my opinion, they were slaves, and because of that, they didn't have to go out and earn any money. They didn't have to do anything. Whoever owned them took care of them, fed them, clothed them, worked them, also lynched them, beat them, brutalized them, dehumanized them. Of course, he didn't mention any of those things. Raped them. And this is an elected official, a county supervisor in the area who just said it, just said this out in the open as if there's nothing wrong with that kind of statement.
And we still have to respond to people on our level or higher in terms of their reputation in the media who just assert there's no racism. The GOP, I mean, after all, come on. Lincoln was a Republican. These are serious things that they say.
Yeah, absolutely. The rest of his quote was, they became dependent, and that dependency is still there. The Democrats right here who depend on the black vote to get elected, they make them dependent on them. And by the way, that disgusting framing is used by Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Republicans in general. I mean, we've heard it by the Trump administration so many times, and it's just, this exists. Like, it's out in the open. It's overt. There's no hiding it. There's no attempt to hide it. So we need to just stop having a debate about whether this country has a race problem, because the debate doesn't need to be had. It's already clearly demonstrated by so many elected officials out in public right now. All right, in the post-game show today, we have many stories for you that you don't want to miss, including, yes, we will talk about the officer who had a meltdown over her delayed breakfast sandwich from McDonald's. We're also going to talk about the censorship that Trump is engaging in when it comes to actual books that are published or will be published about him. We'll give you that and more when we do our postgame today. Become a member, tyt.com/join. We'll see you there.
I'm here today to announce the program known as DACA is being rescinded.
We don't run our own country. We've lost our democracy, and all we have left is rage.
Where are the Democrats? I would be on every cable news channel screaming and yelling and talking about what the Republicans are doing right now.
How do you expect us to get excited to show up to the polls for these loser Democrats? How come we have nothing but cowards who'll never fight? Primaries are everything.
Building a great wall on the southern border.
You have politicians who fearmonger about disenfranchised groups.
The first attacker came through the visa lottery.
Now they are against legal immigrants.
Ending chain migration.
They don't want people from those countries coming here because they're racist. This guy's an absolute monumental disgrace to all of us as Americans.
I ordered to launch precision strikes on targets.
That is what I was warning about for literally years on this program. This is what they promised they would do if they got into power, and what do you know? They did it.
I've now shown dozens of videos on the Young Turks of cops handcuffing people who are bleeding to death. His life means nothing. We have been trained to be cowards, so we're gonna handcuff that guy bleeding to death.
What does this law mean? These are all just basic BS coverings.
To every politician who is taking donations from the NRA, shame on you.
They said that this was impossible, but now we're beginning to move that boulder. And at the end, we'll get our democracy back. Primary the living hell out of these Democrats, and let's take over the party. That's a ghost ship. Let's board it, and let's take it.
I've been a fan of TYT, I believe, for the last 6 years.
5 years.
3 years now. 7 years.
4 years now.
2.5 years. I just started because she got me into it.
My boyfriend actually watches it every morning and every night, so I kind of just started watching it with him, and I love it. I mean, it's the only way that I find my news.
Looking through YouTube, looking for political shows that look cool.
I came across a very angry rant from Cenk, and that's when I knew.
So I was immediately in love with the show.
And then I haven't missed a live show since then.
10 times a day, I watch the show in the morning.
Whenever I had a bad day at high school, Young Turks.
Man, Cenk is just so blunt and honest, and I love the honesty, and there's no BS behind the news, and they just tell everything like it is.
There's nobody censoring them. There's nobody there to say you can't do this, you can't say that.
That feel of authenticity makes it seem like what they're saying is true.
I feel like I get the real story from the Young Turks.
I am TYT.
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 Mayweather will knock out Pacquiao. Floyd beats his wife.
Our system is inherently rigged against the will of the people.
They have 50% of the vote, and in a democracy, they should have 50% of the seats.
But if you live in an insanely gerrymandered district, your vote functionally doesn't matter.
We drew the map in a way that even though we get 50% of the vote, we're gonna get 13 out of the 18 seats.
You don't actually have the ability to translate the will of the voters in your area into actual government policy.
They should not be allowed to gerrymander these districts. We should actually have a democracy.
Hey guys, welcome back to the post-game show. Anna and John with you. John, let's take a little tiny bit of a breather. There are stories I want to get to, but just want to check in. How you doing? How you feeling? Like, do you have something cute to share with us? Something that's not devastating?
My dogs continually whine to be let out, and then as soon as I run over there to do it, in the seconds I have before I have to be back live on camera, then they're then whining to come back in. No, I'm rotting as a human. I mentioned last week, that because on Wednesday, JR's on TDR, that he had lost a bunch of weight during the coronavirus, and I was very angry at him for telling me that. He since last week, he's lost more weight, and he told me this morning. What is his problem with me that he keeps having to reveal how he's flourishing under these conditions?
Yeah, it's so I've hit that point where when things start to weigh on me, the news weighs on me, and it actually has an impact, a significant impact on the way I feel about everything, I lose my appetite. So I'm not
awesome.
One of those I'm emotional and I'm not an emotional eater, or I don't go to food for comfort. It's the opposite, and yeah, I don't know. That's not healthy either. It's
That's
just
true.
Everything, I'm nauseous all the time. I'm constantly nauseous, and it's because of this disgusting stuff that we cover every day. But anyway, let's, do I have anything cute to share with you? No, I don't. There's nothing.
You're out of cue. It's just that well is dry.
100%. So speaking of people who are rotting and have been rotting, let's talk about Donald Trump and his acts of censorship that the right wing seems to not care about at all. So the Department of Justice is suing John Bolton and his book publisher because they claim that John Bolton signed an NDA, and by publishing this book, he's allegedly publishing classified information. Now, I don't buy that argument almost ever, because anytime the federal government wants to prevent the public from knowing about something, they argue that, oh, it's classified information. I don't buy it. So let me give you the details and also remind you that John Bolton was Donald Trump's national security advisor. He did leave the administration on bad terms. The Trump administration is not a fan of Bolton. Bolton is not a fan of the Trump administration. Bolton is still a terrible person overall. I don't want anyone to forget about that. He is a war hawk. He has done terrible things. He has encouraged the country to engage in wars that we should not have engaged in. And more importantly, in this book, this upcoming book, he is going to share details of the impeachment investigation that he probably should have shared by testifying against Trump. But he refused to do that. He needed the courts to get involved to force him to testify, so he wouldn't look as bad among his Republican colleagues. But nonetheless, let me give you the details of what's happening with this DOJ lawsuit. The lawsuit alleges that Bolton breached his non-disclosure agreement with the government by moving forward with the release despite having not finished the pre-publication review process with the National Security Council. The lawsuit claims that the book, as I mentioned earlier, titled "The Room Where It Happened," contains classified information. Just a small point, a dumb point, but like that is a very strange title for this book, "The Room Where It Happened." But okay. All right.
We're going for vague here, Anna.
Bolton does reveal some pretty interesting details related to the impeachment investigation. Several legacy print publications have already published some excerpts from his book. In it, he says that the impeachment investigation should have been broader, looking into, possible financial crimes committed by Donald Trump. Gee, I wonder who else was making that argument. And Bolton, by the way, also talked about how Trump was trying to get China to help him with his reelection campaign. And he was using trade negotiations as leverage, which is just, it's unsurprising to me. We even saw him during Chopper Talk encouraging China to investigate, at the time, Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, who was a front runner at that time during the Democratic primary. So
coincidentally, yeah, hard to believe that he would try to push China to help him out electorally. Yeah, look, he was in the room where it happened. I will give him that, as he has noted on the cover. And so, look, if he has things to say, then we should certainly consider them. But the issue isn't just that Bolton is a murderous psychopath who wanted to, launch us into wars that would have killed God knows how many people, and has fought his whole life for that. Like, the one driving principle of John Bolton is that there aren't enough people in the U.S. and around the world dying from wars he initiated. It's also that I don't know why we would necessarily believe much that he would have to say. I understand that there are legal implications to demonstrable lies, potentially, maybe. But I would say that at the very least, you need a big grain of salt with any claim that he makes, especially when it is clear that this is a money-making enterprise. As you alluded to, he could have used this information to testify when it mattered during impeachment. He chose not to. He pushed ahead with a book, which he's going to make money off of. And as a sort of side note, I understand people wanting to see what he has to say. Much of it will be available as excerpts in articles. You might be able to find the book in some fashion. I would say no one should pay for this. He should not earn $1 for a combination of his cowardice in not coming forward with this information earlier, let alone all that he's actually done across his career.
I appreciate your giving people some caution in believing things that Bolton has to say. There are things that I think Bolton is alleging that we have evidence of, right? Like we've done so much reporting of Donald Trump's possible financial crimes. And so it's not just about Bolton, but I do like that you're mentioning that because yes, you're absolutely correct. There is a profit motive behind what Bolton's doing. And so make sure that you really fully investigate all of his claims. But honestly, to that end, Donald Trump and the Republican Party at this point in general lie to the American people on a daily basis about literally everything, right? Where we are in this pandemic, which is costing people their lives. What Democrats allegedly do. I mean, there's a lot to criticize Democrats on, as you guys know from this show, but just like the most outlandish, ridiculous things imaginable. The lies about Black Lives Matter, the lies about Antifa, the lies about everything and anything, about Muslims. Like, it's just nonstop. So John Bolton comes from a culture of liars. And so I wouldn't be surprised that he would lie for profit. But with that said, I do think that there are some perspectives that he provides that only reinforce what we already knew about Donald Trump, right? He is a criminal. So the DOJ lawsuit, by the way, also claims that some, up to several paragraphs in length, the lawsuit alleges that disclosure of that information could be expected to cause serious damage or exceptionally grave damage to the national security of the United States. It's just such a joke.
But I mean, I get, like, we could theoretically keep it to this area, but I mean, Trump just sat twiddling his thumbs while 120,000 people died from coronavirus. I don't think that concern for damage to the national security of America is like the thing that's driving him. Like, imagine on a pie chart of embarrassment, worries about how it might affect the election, concern for national security, what a tiny little sliver that would be in his considerations when it comes to this book.
Absolutely. And by the way, the book is expected to cover the Ukraine saga, as I mentioned, and similar transgressions that existed across a full range or the full range of his foreign policy. And that's according to a review from the publisher. Now, with that said, this is not the only book that Trump is attempting to censor. Trump is considering suing his own niece, Mary Trump, who is the daughter of Donald Trump's brother, who passed away. And apparently Mary Trump has some stories to share about how terrible Donald Trump is. Now, again, we already knew that, but there's some family drama apparently that Trump wants to keep under wraps. According to the Daily Beast, the president's legal team would likely send his niece a cease and desist letter. The unnamed source told the Daily Beast that Mary Trump signed an NDA after her and her brother Fred Trump the third's bitter legal battle against the rest of the family in the early 2000s over the legal will of Fred Trump Sr. So when Fred Trump Sr. died, they apparently got into a fight over his assets. And Mary Trump happens to be the person who leaked part of Donald Trump's tax returns to the New York Times, which discovered that there were all sorts of schemes, all sorts of fraud committed in order to prevent paying taxes on the $413 million that Fred Trump had passed down to Donald Trump.
Yeah. Isn't it, this is to some extent what I said this morning on the Damage Report, but isn't it weird that, like, so Trump has this scheme to evade millions of dollars of taxes, and she knows enough about it that could potentially get him in trouble. So he has her sign an NDA, not just on that matter, but indeed the entirety of their relationship. Like, Trump has an aura amongst his followers of being like an everyday working guy. Yeah, what everyday working class person hasn't had an NDA on their niece to make sure that people don't find out about their tax scheme to save millions of dollars? It's just so, like, imagine if that same story came out, but it was Mary Biden. And Biden had an NDA on his niece from 20 years ago, and now he was doing everything he could to stop her from revealing their relationship. It's just it's so weird to know that. I don't necessarily think that much is going to come of this book. I can't imagine what access she's had for the past 15 years, and if she had it, she would have come out earlier, I would imagine. But, like, imagine if it was about another politician, and it doesn't matter. To his base, what could she possibly reveal that would turn them against him at this point, considering all that we know?
It's like, I think maybe some of the stuff that she reveals in this book is just like positive advertising for Trump among his base specifically. Like, yeah, you're right. Look, the only time I see people wavering on Trump is when he's revealed to be the coward that he really is, right? And also when he actually does hurt people financially. I mean, so many farmers across the country have been devastated by Trump's trade war, and they've never recovered. The number of farmers who committed suicide as a result of that financial devastation, like,
Yeah.
There have been Trump supporters who have, suffered grave consequences, and we don't really get to hear from them much because they get drowned out by the pro-Trump people. But this is what Trump is doing when it comes to anything negative being published about him. He tries to censor the books. He tries to intimidate people by pursuing legal action. And I'm sure that this is the exact type of situation that someone like Dave Rubin is going to write about extensively, since it's a free speech issue, right? Very serious free speech issue.
You were doing everything you could to sort of hold it together and hide that you were about to go in that direction, but I knew it from the beginning. Like, imagine if someone had just, as a massive stunt that has apparently flopped, someone had written a book about censorship of books and how it's bad and how we should avoid it. And you'd made your entire brand about caring about the First Amendment, which you seem to have a very loose grasp of what it actually protects and what it doesn't, but you at least say the word a lot. And now there's this test of it. And you're not even a dogmatic Republican. You're like something aside. You can criticize Trump if you want. Imagine if that person was silent now, how embarrassing that would be. Unimaginable. Couldn't happen.
I don't know, John. I mean, what about Trump's ideas? I mean, it's just more ideas. We can't be mad at his ideas. All right, let's move on to cops losing it over McMuffins. So we live in a funny world. Okay, so a police officer was filmed, but she actually filmed herself having a little bit of a breakdown because she had pre-ordered a breakfast sandwich from McDonald's, then went to go pick it up, and it was delayed. She shared her displeasure at that in a video, and the video went viral. Let's take a look at what she has to say.
They asked me to pull up because my food's not ready. It's an English muffin meal with a hash brown and coffee. And, I mean, I hadn't eaten since I've been up for a very long time, but I haven't eaten in a while, so I was kind of hungry. And I'm still waiting, and I'm still waiting. And they asked me to pull up. So I pull up forward, and a girl comes out with my coffee, and just the coffee. And she hands it to me, and I have my window down. And that's all she hands me is the coffee. So I told her, I said, don't bother with the food because right now I'm too nervous to take it. It doesn't matter how many hours I've been up. It doesn't matter what I've done for anyone. Right now I'm too nervous to take a meal from McDonald's because I can't see it being made. I don't know what's going on with people nowadays, but please, just give us a break. Please just give us a break. I don't know how much more I can take. I've been in this for 15 years, and I've never, ever had such anxiety about waiting for McDonald's drive-thru food. So just have a heart, and if you see an officer, just tell them thank you. Because I don't hear thank you enough anymore.
So I'm going to have a super unpopular opinion on this, and I will be dragged for it. Everyone will hate me, but I'll share it. Before I do, though, John, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, when I first watched that, I wondered, is this actually a cop? Would a cop actually have filmed this and released this? And I don't know. I don't know that it's even been confirmed. Apparently, some police departments in the area that conceivably she could work for have said that she's not an officer working for them. I don't know that any department has actually claimed her yet. So I would just say, whatever our opinion is, let's bear in mind the possibility that it could come out that by tomorrow or the next day it turns out this is just a random person trying to go viral or whatever. But anyway, yeah, no, look, if you're a cop and you feel targeted and you don't feel safe ordering food, imagine how people who are worried about being killed on the streets every day of their life might feel. I would turn a little bit of that empathy outward, honestly. I have other thoughts, but I'm curious to see, what you're going to say.
Yeah, look, the general problem, and the general problem is that there seems to be a rejection still about what the very legitimate concerns are of protesters and Black Lives Matter, everyone who is supportive of the movement, supportive of the protests, they keep getting like gaslit by police departments, the police union, previously everyone in the media. And it's frustrating because we see video after video after video after video, like so much footage of people who are not an imminent threat getting shot and killed or choked out in broad daylight. And then the response is, we don't have an issue here, from police in general. And so understandably, when you come across a video like that, and for the sake of this discussion, let's just assume it's real, okay? Of course, with the caveat and disclaimer that it might turn out to not even be real, but let's just say it is. When you see that kind of reaction, you know, of course, people are going to laugh at you or roll their eyes because it seems ridiculous to cry over an English muffin while police still reject the fact that there's a systemic problem in policing, a cultural problem with policing. And so, yeah, so I want to make that point. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. At the same time, though, if she's paranoid, she's obviously very paranoid. And it's not about the English muffin. I know it seems like it's about the English muffin, but she is very paranoid right now. She thinks that people are out to kill her or hurt her. She's not the only one who's like been paranoid about a fast food restaurant potentially poisoning her food. The New York Police Department had to do an investigation into Shake Shack because some of the cops within that department thought that Shake Shack poisoned them. And the investigation, of course, found that no, that's not the case. Shake Shack did absolutely nothing wrong. When I look at that video of that woman, though, I get that paranoia, right? Like when you get death threats every day, as I do, right? And especially during 2016, like 2016, my entire personality changed in like ways that I hate. And I stopped liking being out in public at all. Like I didn't, and I still am dealing with that. And I probably need to get some help for it. But like when you're constantly told, like, I'm going to find you, I'm going to send a group of men to rape you, we're going to murder you, we're going to kill you. When you see things like Cesar Sayoc sending pipe bombs to journalists who speak out against Donald Trump, you start to get paranoid, and sometimes unreasonably so. So I'm just saying, like, I get it. I get the knee-jerk reaction to immediately clown her and make her out to be like a horrible person. And absolutely, if she is a cop and that's confirmed, she should speak out about what police brutality has done to the Black community, to Black people in this country, to people in general, right? Mostly Black people, but we've seen many cases of people of all different backgrounds who have dealt with this type of brutality. Yes, she should acknowledge that. At the same time, when someone is having that kind of like breakdown, that mental health breakdown, I just personally feel uncomfortable like making fun of her, you know?
I get what you're saying.
Because we don't know her. We don't know her. And
yeah.
And
you're a good person.
Please don't hate me. Everyone's going to hate me. I just want you guys to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not justifying any of what we've been critical about when it comes to policing. But anyway, it's very easy to have like strong opinions about a video that you've come across. But I just feel like we need a little bit of compassion all around right now. And I don't know. My heart breaks when I see someone having a paranoid breakdown.
You're a progressive, and empathy is high priority in your value system. Look, I very briefly while watching it felt the same thing. I feel bad. I don't want people to feel bad or to be sad or scared. That's the natural reaction that we have. But I have to put it in context. And she's paranoid, and conceivably the solution to a problem, or for any cop, would be making their lunch at home. And I'm not saying they should have to do that, obviously. No one should mess with anyone's food. But hypothetically, that could save you from the paranoia you have. Other people are paranoid too, and the solution isn't so easy. They're being stalked on the streets. My friend Tremaine has been pulled over. He couldn't tell you how many times through the course of his life. He's never done anything wrong. And he's paranoid that every time he gets pulled over, he could end up being shot. So, and you can't just make lunch at home to solve that. And to put that video out during this, when this movement is about, can you acknowledge that Black people are being hunted down and killed in the streets? And still, during the protests, it's happening. every day, it's going to read as a little bit disconnected from reality. And I would say,
for
if
sure,
you are,
yes.
Yeah, if you're a cop, like let's say she's actually a cop, and let's say she's a good person, doesn't do anything like this, which is great. Then think about why the reputation of cops has been as damaged as it has, and what could save it. What could get us back to the point where people are like, yeah, the cops, they protect and serve. That's what they do. That's what they're known for. If you want to get to that, and the message getting out there from the vast majority of at least police unions and politicians who are very closely tied to police is no reform is necessary, stop attacking cops, that is not a solution to your problems. Your paranoia is not 100%. Going to go away. The respect is not going to come back. So, you can choose your path, but I would say that the path that many cops seem to be taking is not one that is going to solve their problems anytime soon.
Yeah, definitely a good point. So yeah, let's move on to the final story. This is not hyperbole. I mean this. This is the most vicious ad I have ever seen. The most. So the Lincoln Project, group of conservatives who absolutely despise Donald Trump. They want him out of office. They have produced what, in my opinion, is the most vicious political ad I have ever seen. Let's watch.
Something's wrong with Donald Trump. He's shaky, weak, trouble speaking, trouble walking. So why aren't we talking about this? And why isn't the press covering Trump's secretive midnight run to Walter Reed Medical Center? Why do so many reporters who cover the White House pretend they can't see Trump's decline? The most powerful office in the world needs more than a weak, unfit, shaky president. Trump doesn't have the strength to lead, nor the character to admit it. We're not doctors, but we're not blind. It's time we talk about this. Trump is not well.
No, progressives will never produce an ad like that, and there's a reason for it. That was so vicious, and that woman who does the voiceover, who is she? Like, I do not ever want to cross her. Like like she taunts you. She taunts you as she's like narrating whatever it is she's narrating. It's anyway.
She's done a few of theirs, I think.
Yeah, she has.
Yeah, she's brutal.
So I look, the one thing that I really did enjoy about that ad was when they showed the image of Trump's like, he looks like a hippie stoner hippie stoner doctor, like hanging out, dude, like, yeah, you're totally
and
healthy,
the line
man.
Is, we're not doctors, and it's like wink, wink, neither is he. Like, yes, that's a good part. I did notice that. So look, my reaction to it is the thing about all of this, whether mental or physical or anything, is that Trump is doing several things that draw these attacks. One, he's lying about all of it. Two, he's viciously attacking other people for these perceived things, whether mental or physical, and has for his entire life. He's brutally attacked people for the exact same things that he seems to be doing. Outside of that, I am uncomfortable about some of the attacks, and even have become more recently uncomfortable because, we talked about the ramp thing on Monday on the Damage Report, and I got messages from some fans saying, I sort of get it, but this does seem like you're attacking a person potentially for physical decline, physical disability, and I don't have any interest in doing that. The thing I'm attacking, what I'm trying to attack, is the fact that he lies about this and that he's brutally, viciously, against other people for these same things. But I have no interest in the crossfire attacking people who have similar physical or mental, decline or disability or anything like that. And so, yeah, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
No, I totally agree with the critics, and I agree with you. So Maggie Haberman from the New York Times, I think gave a super weak argument for speculating about Trump's health. She was like, well, he tweeted about it, so he opens himself up to the speculation and the criticism and all that. I disagree. I don't think that that's enough of a reason. And look, when the primaries were happening, the Democratic primaries, I was actually genuine, it wasn't a political move, right? I was genuinely concerned about Joe Biden's health, mental health. I didn't do it to destroy him. I did it because we all saw it with our own two eyes. And honestly, like since the primaries, every time he does like a public event now or goes on television, he seems to be doing better, and that's made me feel better. But the reason why I bring it up is because I was concerned, like if he's going to end up being the Democratic nominee, and this is the most important election in our lifetimes, we should be aware of what's going on. So I want to just address that real quick. But yeah, I didn't really like that ad. It was uncomfortable to watch it. I think Trump is a horrible person and he shouldn't get reelected for so many different reasons. And look, if journalists want to make a case about how it's important to talk about Donald Trump's health, they should have stayed on the story about how he stole his own medical records, how he got his little cronies to break into a doctor's office and steal Trump's medical records. That is a story that's worth talking about and harping on. Mm-hmm. But, you know, Trump does not seem well to me mentally, and it's based on the way he acts, the things that he says, the things that he does. And I just think that he's not well mentally because he's a bad person. And I think it's abundantly clear, and we can just focus on that.
I see it a little bit different. I think that the breaking in for the medical records, the not wanting his taxes to come out, the blocking his college transcripts and stuff, it's a lifelong pattern of humility. When you excel in all of these areas, you don't want to shove it in people's face. And that's why you will go to literally any lengths, legal, criminal, whatever, to make sure that people don't see that they could never match you. They could never reach the levels that you've reached. And that's, I
thought you were actually disagreeing with me. I was like,
no.
Oh, okay, I want to hear your perspective. Yeah. No, totally.
He's a fraud. Attack him for that. He's a fraud.
Totally agree. All right, guys. That does it for our show today. Thank you so much for watching. Special thanks to everyone who's worked on this show. All the people behind the scenes that you guys never see on camera who make our graphics. Matthew, who does that on a daily basis. Our editors. Arthur Aguirre, J.R. Jackson puts together a lot of the video content you guys see in the show. I just feel like they deserve a world of gratitude because they go through all of this with us. And there's a lot of like therapeutic value to be able to like talk about these issues on this platform. And, I just want them to know that we're grateful for everything they do. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. And because of you members, we wouldn't be able to have them work with us if it weren't for your support. So thank you for being members. We love you guys, and we'll see you soon.